Regional variants are aplenty within the world of Pokemon, transforming classic favorites of the franchise into brand new and exciting Pokemon. Marowak finally becoming the ghost type who is powered by the wraith of its mother. Wooper somehow becoming even more adored than before, ancient forms of Pokemon that have seemingly disappeared from existence, and even the reveal that Pokemon such as Zigzagoon originated from Galar. So I decided to surf with Raichu, dive into the Kanalav library to learn about the history of Sinnoh and Hisui, and even visit Kitakami itself, all to uncover the hidden inspirations and lore of all of our regional variants. Howdy there, I'm Krillic, and I have to say immediately right now, regional forms or variants are one of the best things, or if not the best thing to ever happen in Pokemon, hands down. Not only because of how they have revived the past, but when we also include their lore and their real-life inspirations, we begin to realize just how detailed they really are. Many of these Pokemon actually have a very strong science or history behind them from the real world, and I'm here to explain it all. I'll even dig into the convergent forms today. Let's simply explain what regional forms are. In Generation 7, they were introduced as regional variants, but by Generation 8 onwards, they have been consistently known as regional forms in the core series games. We currently have Alolan, Galarian, and Paldean forms of Pokemon, but because of this, we now call Pokemon such as Rattata by two names, Cantonian Rattata or Alolan Rattata, having the region we find them in as part of their name so we can understand which one we're talking about. And what's really fun about this is that Pokemon was set to have regional variants since the very beginning. Many of you may know about the Crystal Onyx, but allow me to tell you that Professor Ivy in the anime was studying regional forms before they were cool. One of her major studies that she published was Pokemon Adaptive Variation as a function of regional distribution, and that is about as scientific as that gets. A perfect little title for an official science publication, but what does that mean in layman's terms, in the common man's terms? It basically means that the more a Pokemon species is spread out from one another geologically, the more they will have adapted to their environments and changed to better suit these new homes. And every single regional form has done exactly that at some point in the timeline. So, without wasting any more time, let's jump into the first regional variant as we go into Alola. Rattata itself is incredibly common in a number of different regions, but the only regions we don't find it in are Hoenn, Kalos, and Galar. And if you had visited Alola many years ago, you would not have found a single Rattata there. But unfortunately, due to them stowing away on cargo ships, they did make it into Alola. To parallel this, and with Alola being based on Hawaii, there originally were no mice found in Hawaii either until they too stored away on cargo ships. So a similar solution was employed by both Alola and Hawaii as they imported what is the equivalent of the Indian mongoose, what we would know as Yungoos. Yungoos and its evolution Gumshoes state that they prefer to hunt after Rattata, which is perfect for ensuring that their numbers can be removed from the Alola region and avoid any further damage. But unfortunately, Rattata would eventually begin changing its habits, becoming more nocturnal over time to avoid the attacks from Yungoos, who is a Pokemon that is only awake during the day and sleeps at night. This behavior, or this change in behavior, is what would eventually lead to the evolution of Rattata into its regional form, Alolan Rattata, now being able to blend in with the night a lot better with darker fur. Now, Alolan Rattata has nearly perfectly paralleled exactly what happened in Hawaii, because the Indian mongoose was brought in, and according to the Hawaiian DNR, while the introduction of mongoose to Hawaii is often casually referred to as an example of biological control gone wrong, the introduction of this species by private individuals in the sugarcane industry was not part of any scientific biological control process. Biological control, or biocontrol, is a robust scientific field in which research is done to identify a predator or pest of a given invasive species from its home range. This is followed by extensive research to determine whether the predator or pest, if introduced to Hawaii, would impact only the invasive species in question. And, long story short, the mongoose did not undergo this evaluation prior to entry and should not be considered an example of biocontrol. Mongoose are opportunistic feeders that will eat birds, small mammals, reptiles, insects, fruits, and plants. They prey on the eggs and hatchlings of native ground nesting birds and endangered sea turtles. The small Indian mongoose has been blamed with the extinction of ground nesting birds in Jamaica and Fiji and commonly kill birds, including 8 federally listed endangered Hawaiian birds, such as the Hawaiian crow, petrels, and the Hawaiian goose. It was estimated in 1999 that mongoose caused $50 million in damages to Hawaii and Puerto Rico annually. I did not realize that Puerto Rico was also affected by this. I'm Puerto Rican, so that's just some fun information for me to read off. So in their effort to try and get rid of the mice, they ended up bringing in this little mongoose who is only active during the daytime in the real world to hunt creatures that they eventually found out were only active at night, and effectively turned one invasive species problem into 2 invasive species problems. And of course, Yungoos is a pretty ravenous Pokemon, but we're not really here to talk about it. If you want to hear all about invasive species in the world of Pokemon, I already have a video on that. But now that we have Alolan Rattata, who is able to stay away from Yungoos safely, what happens to its habits? Well, it searches out fresh food by smell and ignores anything that is spoiled. The whiskers provide it with a keen sense of smell, allowing it to find hidden food instantly, and humans are known to use Alolan Rattata whenever they go shopping for fresh food. Just imagine recreating the entire Ratatouille movie, but instead of little old Remy, it's a foot-long, 8-pound rat that you walk on a leash. That is vastly different. Now that does make me wonder about the health hazards to food, or how food regulations even work within the world of Pokemon, because there's no chance at all that the general public will just accept an animal such as an orangutan cooking for them. But Oranguru is arguably easily more intelligent than your average human, and at least within Alola, it may be accepted more easily, especially as the residents there, as shown in the anime, like to be more one with nature, more communal with nature, as they believe that nature and humanity derive power from each other, or rather, humans derive power from nature. Either way, Alolan and Rattata are more active when the sun sets. They will search for food in order to give to their boss, and have been known to sneak into people's homes to find food. They use their whiskers to locate the food, and there have been massive outbreaks in Alola due to their efforts. And as a result, they have become an issue of public concern for humans. And Pokemon doesn't really talk about it all that much, but Pokemon do defecate and urinate. We know this from many Pokemon leaving droppings behind, such as Wingull, Coughing, and Turtonator itself, as it has explosive poop due to the high sulfur content that it ingests. And the reason I bring this up is because the public concern goes beyond Rattata just raiding pantries. People and Pokemon both can get sick within the world and require more than just a spin in the Poke Center. As such, we can safely assume that a drove of Rattata in any amount can cause great damage to crops, deplete storage supplies of fresh food, and with such an incredible appetite, all of the food they eat has to come out eventually, so this in turn will lead to the spread of disease and maybe even the rise of Pokemon such as Garbodor, who were a massive issue within the Alola region. And this extends into an even larger issue once it evolves into Raticate. This variant uses its nest as a food stockpile and generally prefers to have the Alolan Rattata it commands go out for food while it remains in the nest and just eats away, the giant old couch potato that it is, or nest potato, I guess. It is very selective in what it eats, only eating fresh, high-quality foods such as fruits. And as a note, because of its diet of rich and likely fatty or sugary fruits, and it not moving or doing much at all, it has become a bit pudgier in comparison to its original or Cantonian form. And rumor has it that a certain high-class restaurant even exploits this selectivity of the foods that it eats, bringing Raticate along to buy ingredients and letting it taste test new dishes. Each Alolan Raticate has its own territory, and disputes over food and feeding grounds happen frequently. Once again, Remy, but Rattata and Raticates. Gotta admit though, rats don't really live longer than 2 to 3 years on average, even with good care. It's just their genetics in the end. But that's gonna be a real problem with Remy's restaurants. Now, there are 2 more bits of information here that I want to briefly speak on, one of them being a question some people have, and that is, why don't the mongoose or young goose just hunt at night? Just do everything but at night. This is a great question. It's because it would be a very poor decision for them. Think of it this way. Our mongoose eat a varied assortment of plants and animals, and the ability to have a varied diet helped animals, or rather continues to help animals survive, because let's say one food source begins to deplete. Well, you still have, 30 other options available to you to help keep you alive by keeping your stomach properly full with all the fats and nutrients that you need. I don't know why I'm tapping my chest, but that's probably just because you can only see my chest and not my stomach. Not only this though, but the rest of your species will likely not follow you in terms of shifting your habits, and that's just a lot of work, so they're almost guaranteed not to do so. It's just flat out unhealthy as you lose out on important sunlight and switch up your circadian rhythm. Not only that, but then you're going to also lose out on the opportunity to mate and ensure that your genes aren't passed down for generations to come, which is the most basic ultimate goal of all living things. Produce children and then die. And of course, all of our lives and animal lives are more than just that, but, again, down to the absolute basics here. Long story short, it would be a major disadvantage for young goose to flip to being a nocturnal creature instead of the diurnal creature that it is. But the last point I do want to mention with this is that this Pokemon and Gumshoes are both totems in Alola. In the games, it is one or the other, depending if you play the Sun or Moon games, but in the anime, the Alolan Raticate specifically guards the Darkinium Z crystal. In the episode, the crystal is embedded in a rock, and not like it was just grown there, no, it looks like it literally crashed into the rock itself and has stayed there for quite some time. There doesn't really seem to be any sort of explanation as to how this happened, but I wouldn't be surprised to find out that it was all just incidental. The crystal breaks off from Necrozma, falls down here, crashes into the rock, embeds itself there, and it eventually is found by or attracts the Alolan Raticate to its location. Maybe it attracted other dark-type Pokemon, but the Raticate was the one to get there first, and because of their high numbers, they were able to take over the area and start guarding it. This would then end with one Raticate taking lead above all the rest and becoming the totem guardian who is most affected by Necrozma's light. And I might need to do a video on how Necrozma's light changed the multiverse, but with this, we can move on to our next Pokemon. We move on to Alolan Raichu, whose origins were initially stated to be a mystery at first. Alolan people suggested that due to a diet consisting of more sweet and fluffy pancakes, Alolan Raichu came into existence, especially as Alola has a really secret recipe for those pancakes. And unfortunately for them, I'm gonna blast this whole thing wide open thanks to the Pacific Indigenous Institute of Hawaii. From their article of Paniolo Pancakes, which should sound incredibly familiar to you, as Paniola is the name of not only the ranch there, but also a city on Akala Island in northeast Alola. The article spoke of onolicious pancakes, gooey pancakes that were old school and was a recipe passed down for generations, something that used to be cooked over a wood fire, though these days you can make it in a cast iron. The pancakes are as follows for at least the recipe: all-purpose flour, brown sugar, salt, water, butter, coconut oil, and guava jelly. But as I look around, it seems as though crushed pineapple, coconut, and macadamia nuts may also be common to add to Hawaiian pancakes. I, of course, am not Hawaiian nor Polynesian, so please take what I say with a grain of salt, as I did my best to find reputable sources for this information. But here's the kicker. You can probably think of any place in your hometown or places you have visited that have their own signature burger, signature pancakes, specialty pies, you name it. This is just another way to get more people to visit their locations, their restaurants, and try them out, to spend money. It is a marketing tool that can work, and it absolutely has a stranglehold on tourists. I mean, even as not a tourist, I see special pies, novelty pies. I don't know. I'm gonna go try it, because what if it is amazing? So as such, we can think of Alolan Raichu now, and how it was eventually discovered through researchers that the change is related to Alolan Raichu's diet in general, in addition to the weather and climate of Alola. this is actually supported even more, as within the Lental region, in the more tropical beaches, we can find Alolan Raichu enjoying the sand, surf, and, oh, well, sun, I meant to say sand, or Sandslash, whatever. And in effect, we look at its fur amongst the rest of its line, and even their shiny forms, with every evolution just getting a little bit darker in complexion. This is likely just an increase of melanin due to receiving more sunlight, which then darkens their fur and supports all of this further. In terms of abilities, it is capable of unleashing star-shaped thunderbolts, which I found no real link to, and it's also called a Hodad, which seems to just be a way to make fun of those who like to say they're surfers because it's cool and they might even dress up like one, but they don't really surf at all and or are beginner surfers, bro. And to be fair, Alolan Raichu just surfs on his tail more than anything, not on an actual surfboard, especially as it just uses psychic power to float on its tail, which means it really isn't surfing at all in the traditional sense. So sure, call it a Hodad. While its cheek sacs are still used to store electricity, rubbing them releases a sweet aroma while also getting a light shock. This is also thought to be connected to its psychic abilities. But when we look at its inspirations, we get some more fun, as according to Ken Sugimori, he asked Atsuko Nishida to design Alolan Raichu since she was the one who had worked on the original Raichu design. Nishida insisted that Raichu has always been cuter than people might think, and designed Alolan Raichu to emphasize Raichu's cuteness. In particular, she designed it with a motif of bread. The in-game lore of people believing that its evolution is induced by eating pancakes was added afterward to play up this concept. The fact that Alolan Raichu was designed after bread may have also inspired the sweet fragrance it can release from its cheeks, as well as the look of its paws, which resembled whipped cream decorations, cream puffs, or Bowsy. And allow me to be the one to say that Raichu itself definitely deserves more love, and Alolan Raichu is definitely going up there as one of the top cutest Pokemon in my personal opinion, especially when we get to see it all happy and carrying, pancakes around. I also realized while writing this that the Pikachu line is seemingly native to Alola, and they are definitively called the mouse Pokemon. So maybe there's a small chance that they were purposely imported and it's kept a secret. I also might be thinking too deep into this, but that's just what I do anyway. In the Alola region, Sandshrew migrated to Stowe Mountains due to the volcanic activity near the desert areas. Thicker plates form a dome around its head, and its ears resemble an igloo's entrances. Adapting to this cold climate, as it did migrate, its body became larger and heavier, with a shell of hard ice covering its hide. The shell is also made of very hard steel itself. Now, this Pokemon being an Ice Steel type is very fascinating. I didn't even realize that it was an Ice Steel type right off the bat when I had first learned about it. And with this connection of Ice and Steel, it seems even more interesting, as though the Steel typing developed first as they adapted to the cold, and then the snow and ice layered upon them more and more until it simply became a part of them, a sort of power that they call upon. And this isn't entirely out of the ordinary, since there are a number of Pokemon that are certain typings, but they are not that type. To clarify, many ghost types are not actual ghosts, such as the Senzu-style Oricorio, who just calls upon the spirits. There's Volcanion, who is a fire-water type but has to absorb water from its surroundings to even use any water or rather steam-based attacks. And, as one more example, Dwebble is a bug rock type, but it can live entirely without a rock. It doesn't like to because it's a hermit crab that likes the safety of its rocky shell, but it is not made of rocks. As such, it seems as though our little Sandshrew just became layered with so much snow that it got packed down, turned into ice, and then even that was made more dense, similar to what we would see at the base of a land glacier. And all of this just occurs on top of its steel shell, an adaptation it built so that way the cold ice doesn't hurt it anymore as it loses its ground typing. This is also something we commonly see with our ground or rock types anyhow. They evolve, and as they do so, some of them gain the steel typing, though this is the only current case in which a Pokemon has replaced the ground type with the steel type. Usually rock is the type that gets lost in its evolution, such as what we see with Onix turning into Steelix. Now, Alolan Sandshrew's steel-like covering grants it extra defense from predators like Sneasel, but it is unable to curl into a ball like its desert counterpart. Smarter predators, such as Weavile, exploit its soft underbelly, which is honestly not that different from many other creatures, as it resembles things such as pangolins. It can burrow itself in the snow to avoid being blown away by blizzards. Its claws allow it to move without slipping on icy surfaces, but then it also slides on its stomach when it needs to move quickly. A traditional Alolan custom during festivals is a competition to see who can slide Alolan Sandshrew across the ice the furthest. That last part being a little bit funny because we can just look at the concept art to see not only does Alolan Sandshrew spin like a Beyblade, but the lady in the art is clearly curling the Sandshrew, like the sport curling. So it's fun to imagine these Sandshrew lining up to get curled across an ice rink by people. Canada, here goes your sport. Actually, I don't know how like big curling is in Canada. I heard it was a long time ago, but I'm an American. I don't really know all that much sometimes, especially when it comes to sports. I'm not really a sports guy. I will say, though, an updated version of the Pokeathlon would go pretty hard with all the different sports and games that have been introduced in the lore. Also, apparently it moves across the ground with bullet-like speed, allowing it to send enemies flying when it hits them. I figured they were moving a bit fast, but bullets having a massive range with the lower end being at about 500 feet a second is a whole other ball game. That amounts to about 340 miles per hour or 547 kilometers an hour, since there are about 3,600 seconds in an hour, assuming it continues to move non-stop without losing any of its speed along the way. There really isn't anything like pangolins or armadillos in Hawaii, so our information and inspirations are really limited to just what we find with the Pokemon itself, but we can at least move on to talk about its evolution, as Sandslash has an icy blue hide and steel quills covered in ice. These quills stand taller than a regular Sandslash's quills and resemble icicles. Unlike its Cantonian variant, Alolan Sandslash is rarely seen curling up into a ball. Perhaps this has been made difficult by its thick hide and icy spine. So instead, this Pokemon uses its hide for camouflage in the snow while exposing only its spines. Its body emits cold air, which sharpens its quills even further. And its forepaws are larger than its counterpart, and its claws are longer, thinner, and hooked at the tips. Formerly used for climbing trees, they now allow it to scale icebergs without slipping. Keep those claws in mind. There is another Pokemon that has claws like this that is incredibly important later on. Despite the weight of its ice-covered body, Alolan Sandslash can move swiftly by carving a path in the snow with its claws. It can move faster than any Pokemon while in the snowy mountains where it tends to live, even being able to run right up an iceberg without slipping. And I have to say, that's actually pretty impressive, especially as icebergs and glaciers in general can be incredibly dangerous, especially when you have the crevices between two peaks, because the area in between those is so cold from the air traveling between the ice, bouncing back and forth, or even the water trapped in between just gets so incredibly dangerously cold. I was informed by my old college geology instructor, who had a master's in this stuff, that if he had fallen into those crevices, he or anyone else would be dead in minutes at the absolute most, and that you just basically give up on the person, which is a horrifying way to go. But back to Sandslash, it will hide away in deeper parts of the mountains where it is forbidden to trek. Though because of the sprays of snow it kicks up being popular, photographers will venture forward for pictures of this Pokemon. Other individuals may try to simply see its icy spikes sparkle during the light of dawn, but it is advised not to bother them, as a stab from their spikes can not only cause deep wounds, but also severe frostbite simultaneously. I mean, you're getting stabbed with an icicle, what do you expect? But from what I understand, it seems to travel by swimming in the snow itself. I understand that it says it's digging, but it seems to be a tunneler like regular Sandslash would be, which isn't all that different. As a final note, because, I can't be purely fun, I guess, Hawaii did not have mice or shrews. This is yet another mouse Pokemon, as it is called a mouse Pokemon, that seems to be native to Alola somehow. KO is otherwise known as Alolan Vulpix, who is a Pokemon that adapted to the snowy mountain peaks and developed a snowy white pelt. They're said to have arrived at about the same time as humans, but they moved onto the mountain in order to avoid other Pokemon. They move in skulks, as any other fox in real life would, and they are led and protected by Ninetales. Their breath is clocked in to be as cold as -58 degrees Fahrenheit or -50 Celsius, which is said to be capable of freezing anything. And of course, I have to be the nerd to say that that is incorrect. Pure ethanol alcohol would not freeze, as it would need to be as cold as -114 degrees Celsius or -173 degrees Fahrenheit. Sorry, 173.2. Though I still would not sneeze at Alolan Vulpix's inability to freeze alcohol, as even an air temperature of 5 Fahrenheit or -15 Celsius can greatly increase your chances of developing frostbite. And it needs to be at about -20 degrees Celsius or -4 Fahrenheit for boiling water to be thrown into the air and instantly freeze as it comes crashing down. As a reminder, KO here is well over double that in the negative. And with it not being suited to the warmer environments, it will just have fun freezing the air around it and making it all that more palatable for itself. I've mentioned its name being KO a number of times now, and that is simply because it refers to it having a white pelt. KO means white, and of course, Weavile is a natural predator of Alolan Vulpix here. They are even found within Hisui, its Legends Arceus Dex stating a small chunk of exactly what we have just learned. Despite this, they are not found in modern-day Sinnoh unless you have Leaf Green in the DS, which, again, it's not Alolan Vulpix, it would be OG Vulpix, and they are otherwise not even present in the remakes. So take that information as you will. Sometime between Hisui and Sinnoh, the Vulpix that were there moved on. I mean, it is connected to Johto and Kanto, at least Sinnoh is, so there is a very good chance that they just migrated. Now, of course, comes my favorite part about talking about Alolan Vulpix, because it can only be found in one spot in Alola, and even when we look at where we find it in Hisui, the place in which we find it is on Sacred Mountains. Though I will keep my focus as we find it within Alola, as it and its evolution is only found on Mount Lanakila, which is just the Pokemon version of Mount Mauna Kea, the tallest mountain in Hawaii. This sacred mountain within the games is the tallest mountain in Alola, located on Ula Ula Island, and Lanakila is even Hawaiian for victory, explaining why Victory Road is here. It is through this connection that we can understand why Alolan Ninetales becomes a fairy type and is considered a deity, because while originally fairy types were supposed to all be aliens, as per the XY files, they are now also symbols of life, supernatural beings, and even celestial creatures. In the case of Ninetales, it has taken a holy or celestial nature as its own. According to the University of Hawaii at Hilo, Mauna Kea holds major spiritual significance to native Hawaiians. Rock pilings, which appear natural, may be man-made markers or cultural altars and are protected by law. During your visit, please demonstrate respect and leave the mountain as you found it. Do not leave items behind or move or remove anything. In addition to the cultural resources, Mauna Kea is home to unique species and habitats and contains the world's most sophisticated collection of astronomical facilities. Use only marked trails and roads, and be mindful of your impacts on the sensitive natural and scientific resources. A lot of that should already be reminding you of Lanakila, but let's continue. Mauna Kea, though simply translated as White Mountain since at least 1823, the name Mauna Kea is also known in native traditions and prayers as Mana Awakea, Mauna Kea, I really hope. If I butcher it, I apologize right now. The mountain of Wakea. It is the firstborn mountain son of Wakea and Pepe, P-A-P-A, who were also progenitors of the Hawaiian race. Mauna Kea is symbolic of the Piko umbilical cord of the island child, Hawaii, and that which connects the islands, or the land itself, to the heavens. So long story short, the mountain connects us to the heavens themselves, and that last part made me so incredibly excited when I first read it, because there is a common trope in Japan, or even other cultures, that the closer you are to space itself, you are closer to the heavens themselves. And here we are, finding a combination of cultural significance coming together as our Kitsune of Ninetales bridges that gap between two vastly different groups of people. To seal the deal, I of course read to you Alolan Ninetales' information, with it living on Alola snow-capped Mount Lanakila, which some people consider holy ground. As such, it is revered as a sacred messenger or deity. It has a gentle and calm temperament and is known to aid lost humans in distress, though this is primarily done to keep them out of its territory. It will punish any threat to its pack of Vulpix. Those who anger it will be frozen stiff in an instant. It can produce ice crystals from its fur, which it can use for both offense and defense, and those ice crystals can also act as a shield or form balls that can be fired like bullets with enough force to shatter rock. I love Alola so much, and if I ever get the opportunity to go to Hawaii, you bet I'm going to be tirelessly traveling as much as I can just to absorb all of the information possible, because I am fascinated by the culture and I just want to understand it and learn it firsthand rather than just reading about it online. I want to respect the culture as much as I possibly can. I will also state that others have made the connection that its mountain habitat and lore as a deity incarnation may be in reference to Poliahu, the Hawaiian goddess of snow, who is said to reside on Mauna Kea. It could also be inspired by Tuliketsu, a mythical fox creature of Finnish lore, whose radiant fur is said to be responsible for the creation of the Northern Lights, which this Pokemon is often associated with. The Finnish word, as well, for aurora, Rovontulet, also literally translates to fox fires, which could be intentional, as Ninetales' original form is a fire type. And as we do close out Alolan Ninetales, and before we do move on, I just want to say thank you so much for watching. If you're enjoying this so far, please do make sure that you do subscribe. You can share the channel with others, but otherwise, the best way to help this channel freely is by leaving a comment. Tell me about your favorite regional Pokemon, or tell me about any information that you learned that you found amazing. Share with me information, as it's the only way that I can really learn, as I can learn from you just as much as you learn from me. But if you'd like to go the extra mile, you can always become a member of the channel on here or Patreon for as little as $3 a month. And right now I'm gearing up to get myself a teleprompter, so that way I can make it a lot easier to make sure I'm always looking at the camera here and reading. And, you know, that only benefits you guys as the quality of the videos go up. You do get a number of other, benefits, but we'll worry about those later. Otherwise, as always, thank you so much for watching, and on with the video. In Alola, Diglett has developed 3 fine metallic gold whiskers on its head from living in soil with high iron content and volcanic environments. These whiskers function as sensors and allow it to monitor its surroundings without having to come up above ground, though it will still occasionally poke its head out to see the outside. The whiskers can also be used for communication, wobbling around to relay mood or emotion. They stand straight up for anger, swing around for happiness, and droop for sadness. Honestly, the only strange thing about the whiskers is that it's on top of Diglett's head. I'm not entirely sure how this helps the Pokemon when underground and digging horizontally, I assume, but at least when it pops up from the ground to the surface, it can have its whiskers out to survey the environment safely. A great adaptation to help it avoid predators or even just simply avoid being stepped on. Needing to be able to dig through Alola's volcanic rock, it is notably stronger than its non-Alolan counterparts. In Alola, their tunneling activity has resulted in creating cultivated soil, which is good enough for agriculture. The people in the Alola region are said to be very grateful for the actions of Alolan Diglett. However, they are still very small as a Pokemon, tying with Klefki and Meltan as the shortest Steel-type Pokemon. And this all just goes back to the common misconception that moles eat your crops and are bad for gardens and agriculture. And while I've mentioned many a time that they aren't, I have not talked about how they actually benefit agriculture. From the University of Florida, I have the following. Although moles can destroy the look of their lawn, or your lawn, they are actually helpful in reducing pest populations. Moles feed on insects that can harm plants, such as mole crickets, beetle larvae, and ants. They also paralyze earthworms and store them as alternative food sources. Additionally, moles in lawns aerate the soil, pushing it from the deep burrows they create up to the surface in small mounds. And to explain that just a little bit further, your soil should have roughly 50% pore space, like a sponge, pores. And this allows air and water to pass through rather than just being trapped in any given location. This will depend on the plant, of course, as some despise having their roots even touch water for more than a couple of seconds to drink, while others thrive with their roots in water all the time. To follow, about 5% of the soil should be organic matter, which is basically just going to serve as your fertilizer, and the final 45% is going to be minerals. Every plant has their own needs, and two plants of the same exact species may still prefer different amounts of water, sunlight, and nutrients. Either way, back to Alolan Diglett, you can understand why it actually is incredibly highly regarded now and very useful to the people of Alola. And as we move on to Alolan Dugtrio, it is actually regarded as a feminine deity of the earth, and taking its hairs is thought to bring bad luck. The people of Alola are known to fall to their knees and bow in respect to any Alolan Dugtrio they encounter. In this region, there is the superstitious belief that several of them will emerge out of their holes whenever a volcanic eruption occurs. Older residents of Alola will flee instantly upon witnessing this unusual sight, and it's believed that they are capable of detecting movements underground that indicate an impending eruption. Due to this, they tend to come above ground in fright as a warning. And the fact that they have hair like this has been suspected to be in relation to Pele's hair, a thin volcanic glass formed near Hawaiian volcanoes. The lore of taking its hairs may reference the modern Pele's curse, while its reputation as a feminine deity may be a reference to Pele herself. Pele's curse is the belief that anything natively Hawaiian, such as the sand rock or pumice, will bring bad luck on whoever takes it away from Hawaii. One version about the legend's genesis or creation is this: a disgruntled park ranger, angry at the number of rocks that were being taken from the island by visitors, said that Pele would curse them with bad luck should they take anything. Another version, often told, is that bus drivers, tired of the dirt and grime brought on their buses by the tourists' collection of rocks, started the story at the beginning of each tour to discourage the rock collecting. The myth has then caught on, told as if it were an original Hawaiian taboo, and every year countless tourists send items back to Hawaii in order to escape the awful luck that Pele has caused them. So although the legend itself is probably of 20th century origin, the removal of rock as souvenirs is now frowned upon by Hawaiians. Also, it is super illegal to remove minerals from within a US national park, so don't do that. There are countless reasons why this is illegal, and the majority of the reasons relate back to preserving the environment. I worked on a rock beach for almost 3 years, and those rocks help ensure that less erosion occurs throughout the year, and I had to stop plenty of people from taking said rocks home for the sake of the beach's health. I was actually recently able to visit a rock in Pebble Beach again. It reminded me that it's built up of more than just one size of rock, but rather multiple different kinds, big and small, flat and rounded, and they all come together like this strange puzzle piece, or entire puzzle rather, to create a floor. Without them, the ground itself would be at a greater risk as the soil would be eroded away bit by bit until even the roots of plants can't save the earth they've dug themselves into. And then that, of course, will destroy any coastal buildings or houses with enough time, rain, and flooding. Also, at this point, I really should have said it, I realize, but there is only one native quote-unquote land mammal in Hawaii, being the Hawaiian hoary bat, who is believed to be one of the inspirations for Lunala. Meowth comes swinging in, not with just one, but two forms that I'll just talk about together rather than leaving the Galar one for later. Starting with the Alolan form, who is the result of the monarchy of Alola. I'm not really sure who that could be within the world of Pokemon, but thanks to the Tapus and their relation back to the great deities of Hawaii, it could actually be related back to King Kamehameha, who was a conqueror and the first ruler of Hawaii. And of course, Pokemon such as Tapu Lele reference the idea of battle and war through a legend that states it ended a war between the Alolan Islands. Definitely gonna have to add that to my video list. The legendaries here have so much more than I have ever explained, and I would love to talk about the hidden war of Alola. But we are here for Meowth, so we will talk about Meowth. starting off as a luxury brought in by royalty until they were repeatedly bred to have the new blue-gray color in their fur. I would even be willing to argue that the coin that they have on their head would also be a quality that was sought after, considering that it seems more golden rather than the yellowish gold that we see on Cantonian Meowth. Unfortunately, due to all the selective breeding, it brought about the after effect of their heads becoming more rounded, especially as they evolve into Persian. But we'll get to that in a moment, because as Meowth was raised in this lifestyle, it became more prideful, more selfish and cunning as it diverged from its origins. It started to get everything that it wanted rather than just having to work for it. What I find very interesting is I often associate feline Pokemon with having the normal, dark, or psychic typings, with a few exceptions such as Shinx. And don't misconstrue what I'm about to say, since I do love cats, but they are some very pampered creatures that can be a bit fickle or ruthless, as many of our house cat Pokemon are often portrayed to be. So it definitely seems to be capitalized on within the idea of taking a cat and really pampering it to the point where if they don't get what they want, they become very underhanded, they start to retaliate, they do decide to be a little bit more cruel. For example, one of my cats actually pees on plastic if we leave anything on the floor in the room that has its litter box. It doesn't even have to be near the litter box, it's our mud room, but he won't pee anywhere else. He won't pee on the shoes in there, nothing along those lines. He just especially dislikes plastic in that room. The other one would just headbutt me over and over again until I actually give her the nightly pets that I have started giving her months ago, and she'll even just yell at me. So I'm kind of stuck in a little bit of loop here with my loving cats. Now knowing the fact that Alolan Meowth gets what it wants when it wants, it has also become impulsive and fickle in its own right. And if someone dirties its coin or besmirches its pride, it goes hysterical, likely because, once again, these were things it was praised and bred for. But eventually, these numbers of Meowth grew high, only for the monarchy to fall, resulting in all of the cats to run into the wild and go feral. Now, the basic difference between wild and feral is this. Wild animals were born in the wild, no duh, and exist there freely as part of the ecosystem. Meanwhile, a feral animal is a domestic or captive status animal that has escaped into the wild and is living in a wild state, quote unquote. Essentially, it has reverted to its untamed form, most common examples being cats, dogs, goats, and pigs. They will stand out from normal wildlife in the area, and they can be considered invasive species if they do cause damage to the ecosystem, humans, or the economy itself. Now that it is feral, Alolan Meowth is as common in Alola as they would be anywhere else as far as a Meowth goes, and they are still famously difficult to train due to their arrogant nature. But they're still popular and loved by some trainers who enjoy giving it a lot of attention. This can actually all be tied to the British Blue, which is a color variant of the British Shorthair that was an imported breed and was well known for its large rounded head and smile. And of course, the British Shorthair is said to have been imported to Hawaii, even having catteries that specialize in kittens since at least around the 1900s. Take that last part with a bit of a grain of salt, because I couldn't find any super reputable sources, but simply a collection of different sources that had roughly the same information. Either way, there's a very good chance that Alola has some older ties with Galar or another European-inspired region that we have yet to see. As it does evolve into Persian, its face really dramatically rounds out, and the jewel on its head turns blue, but is said to be made mostly of the same material as regular Persian's jewel. Its eyes are usually half closed, and its fur is said to be of a high-class quality that is softer than velvet, making it an admired quality by people and Pokemon within Alola. Just imagine giving, like, you know, lovingly little headbutts or rubbing your face against theirs. It's gotta be nice. Now, it is considered to have great beauty within Alola, and the bigger and plumper their faces, the more beautiful it is considered. Gonna mark that up as another sign that it'll just get inbred a lot more until their fat heads can't even go through doorways, having to move sideways to get through them. Due to its distinctive frame, it is well protected and cared for in Alola, and there are even strict inspections that are required before tourists are granted permission to take one Alolan Persian to their home region. That last part is incredibly interesting, as it does relate back to real-life cats once again, who will get taken in by animal shelters. Then these shelters may be visited by people who simply want to sell them off for great amounts of money, like actual tens of thousands of dollars. This, of course, would cause incredible stress to the animal to begin with, as they are transferred from home to home to home a great distance. But of course, there could be far worse things happening to them that I am unaware of. Moving forward with its behavior, it is described as being highly intelligent, having a higher opinion of itself, and having so much pride that it will look down on everything other than itself. I can't believe it! It's looking down upon others so much that she's looking up! Thank you, Boa Hancock, as a Alolan Persian, I guess. But it, of course, is very difficult to train as a partner in battle, mainly due to it not wanting to bond with its trainer, despite having incredibly formidable physical abilities in battle, which I will say, the bond between people and Pokemon is incredibly important within, the world of Pokemon, as it draws out a Pokemon's maximum power. It's why Mega Evolution can fail or be used effectively. It's why Z moves do or don't work. And of course, it is why Battle Bond works. So it's interesting to have a Pokemon so unwilling to bond with its trainer due to how it was bred and raised. When battling, it acts refined, but then will use underhanded tactics, thus explaining the dark typing much more. It will use surprise attacks to, again, surprise its foes. It'll use trickery and even full-on foul play such as sucker punches. Because of this, it may even prefer to torture its weakened prey rather than finishing them off. Their personality first causing opponents to underestimate them, only to be deceived and left open for a counterattack. And I will also note that all of this is not just the personality of your feral ones. This extends to the pets of others, as we see an Alolan Persian actively track down and consistently bully a Litten that just wanted to bring berries or other foodstuffs to a Stoutland too sick to move very far. Even tracked them down to one of their homes and attacked as a part of revenge for being chased away by Ash, who was helping Litten not die by falling off a cliff edge. So yeah, these Alolan Persian can be pretty cruel, to say the absolute least. Pretty fitting for a Pokemon that is also the visual representation of being big-headed. But we aren't quite done with Meowth yet, as when we look at them in Galar, they're drastically changed again, as they're said to have had parts of its body turned to iron after living with savage seafaring people. This in turn has even caused them to become more daring, and the coin on their head to become harder, even darkening in the process, which the darkening of their fur could also be related back to, again, more melanin from more sunlight or just the iron content. Who could these savages be that took in Meowth? Well, those would be the Vikings, who are hinted at to have existed within the Galar region or around it through even other Pokemon such as Runerigus, who bears Jormungandr upon its runes, but we'll talk about them later. I just want to add in the idea that Vikings are said to have kept cats on their ships as pets in order to kill mice and rats in order to help preserve food and prevent disease. Otherwise, they may have also been farmed for their fur or given as wedding presents due to their association with the Norse goddess Freya, which Freya was associated with love, beauty, fertility, war, and magic, which other than maybe war, I can't really reliably state that she was exactly an inspiration for our Galarian Meowth here. For now, it could be stated that Galarian Meowth may be based on Norwegian forest cats, who are large fluffy cats with beard-like ruffs, or European wildcats, both of them being very fitting, especially when we look at its evolution. But before we do talk about Berserker, it is noted that Galarian and Cantonian Meowth do not get along, but I can't really imagine that it would get along with Alolan Meowth either. They also kind of remind me of when an animal isn't groomed and their fur becomes dirtier, more compact, and stuck together over time due to a number of different reasons. This makes it more dense and can cause a number of issues as it traps dirt, grime, and even insects within it, and can result, at the absolute least, in rashes, though that might not at least be the case here. When it does evolve into Berserker, it now gains a violent and barbaric demeanor, and it lives for the thrill of battle. It and Persian have a relationship characterized by mutual disdain on account of the irreconcilable differences in their respective temperaments. The hair on its head and parts of its limbs have hardened into natural armor. The former takes the shape of a stereotypical horned Viking helmet that covers its ears and part of its eyes, while also incorporating its coin. Berserker's claws have also grown longer and harder, and can come together to form daggers that it uses to fight its foes with more effectively. Now this, of course, leads fully into the idea of the Vikings, and its name is after that of the Berserker. These were Scandinavian warriors who fought in a trance-like fury, fighting furiously in and out of control or violent manner. Think like a barbarian in D&D, or especially Karlach in Baldur's Gate. When we looked at an artifact or a sketch of the Berserker, we see the same horns, and even the dagger on the hip of the individual seems to be the exact same as the shape that the Berserker's claws form into, which is really cool. It may also be based on Freya's cats, which were gifted by Thor, commonly named Beigul, Honey, and Tregul, Amber, which pulled her chariot. Both its regular and shiny coloration could be a reference to them, as they were gray or blue in appearance, meanwhile their names may have brought about their shiny coloration. A final detail as to Berserker's cooperation with Vikings and others of its kind comes through with its currently unique ability that only it, again, can currently have. Steely Spirit. Feels like a JoJo's, stand to some capacity, probably because of Steel Ball Run. But this ability powers up Steel-type moves used by Berserker and its allies by 50%, and the effect even stacks if there are multiple Pokemon with this ability on the field. As such, let's just all be grateful that we don't encounter them in hordes. But it would be pretty cool to see it happen, even if it meant we'd be reduced to dust by their attacks, especially if there was a Jirachi out there with Doom Desire. That little shooting star will make us wish we never existed. Back to Alola, the Geodude line here is fun, as they revolve around the idea of magnetism getting stronger and stronger as it evolves. But rather than it just being an attracting force of magnetism, it is also a repelling force. In the Alola region, Geodude is made from a magnetic rock with a more silvery appearance. There are areas on Alolan Geodude's body that are especially magnetic and attract iron sand, creating the appearance of black eyebrows and strands of short black hair. Its fingers are fused together, leaving only the thumb and index finger free. That's gotta suck a little bit, because you were born in a specific world, you now have less fingers. Stepping on Alolan Geodude results in an electrical shock and sometimes an angry headbutt. Like regular Geodude, it competes with others by bashing their bodies together. The iron sand sticks to the one with the stronger magnetism. And the Alolan Golem in the area will fire these Geodude from its back if real rocks are absent. Now, of course, we have Magnetite being used here to help make up our Pokemon, which is part of some black sand, and Magnetite getting its name from being magnetic. It's also said that the structures on its body may be related to piezoelectric crystals. Piezoelectricity meaning electricity resulting from pressure and latent heat, which does make sense considering how different types of rocks may be formed. And as it does evolve into Graveler, it seems to have that same silvery sheen and several small yellowish crystals scattered on its body with more iron sand. It is very quick-tempered and feeds on Dravite, which is what makes up those yellowish crystals and grants it electrical abilities. Now, according to the Smithsonian, Dravite is a member of the Tourmaline family. It is typically brown to brownish black and sometimes dark yellow to dark orange brown. It is commonly known as brown tourmaline. It was named after the area where it was first discovered near the Dravo River in Dravograd, Slovenia. What's odd though is that it is not conductive but can exhibit electrical properties. This is shown when it is put under pressure, which then allows it to emit an electric charge, similar to how Geodude releases an electric charge when you step on it, or when Graveler fight each other, as they often do over food, when they smash their bodies together as an aggressive term to try and get the food from each other, it will result in a flash of light and a booming sound. For For this reason, people refer to it as the fireworks of the Earth. The sudden increase in pressure during impact is what is allowing that spark of light, which is the Dravite in action. Just on a much more extreme scale than what would happen in real life to my knowledge. And when it does eat Dravite, crystals form inside of it and rise to Graveler's surface. And similar to its Cantonian counterpart, it rolls down mountain paths. However, instead of flattening obstacles as it rolls, it instead sends them flying by zapping them with electricity. As it finally evolves into Alolan Golem, its face begins to attract iron sand, giving it the appearance of having a mustache, eyebrows, and a large black beard. I don't know about you, but I see its facial hair and I immediately think of either Russia or Slovenia, which does tie back to what we talked about with Dravite earlier. But of course, this Graveler gains a massive set of rocks that form the shape of a cannon, set with Dravite on the insides to allow it to launch rocks or Geodude with electromagnetism. And when the rocks land, electricity will explode out into the area as the rock itself is electrically changed due to whatever minerals are found inside or electrically charged. I have a typo there. Either way, this will even cause numbing and fainting from just a glancing blow, which I'd say that makes up plenty for it not being able to easily roll up into a ball as its Cantonian cousin can. Should anyone make Alolan Golem upset, it will roar with a voice similar to thunder, discharging electricity from its body at the same time. It's also the only known Pokemon with Galvanize as an ability, which can be defined as stimulating or shocking with an electric current. And lastly, I couldn't find anything else regarding the ties of Dravite to Hawaii. Not that, there was any at all for that matter, so maybe I just missed something, but maybe there is no big record of Dravite there. But at least with black sand, it is something that can be produced and washed onto shores by volcanoes or volcanic activity. Grimer and Muk are some of the most fascinating Pokemon, and I had looked at them amongst many other poisonous or toxic Pokemon recently in a different lens through a video on the polluted world of Pokemon. The most interesting part is that many of them eat garbage or drink in toxic fumes. They are the Pokemon world's answer to human-based pollution, and while they may release some as well or create new ones, it's when they seem to intake enough of it or they take in the right kind that they transform into a creature that can clean the environment itself. And this is what has happened to Grimer when it was imported to Alola. This was because there was a point in time where there was an excess of waste within Alola that was generated by the people who lived there, which this, once again, makes me wonder if the mistreatment of nature was the focus of war, considering the involvement of the Tapus. Nevertheless, Alolan Grimer eats solid garbage instead of sludge. This new diet has caused its body composition and form to change. Its teeth are actually crystallized toxins formed from its diet. It is not known how to break down these crystals, but direct contact with them is known to be incredibly dangerous. Lethal poisons leak out of Alolan Grimer's body when these crystals fall out, and because it produces and stores toxins within its body, it does not produce a foul stench like Cantonian Grimer. So what it seems like is that regular Grimer, who lives mostly in sewers or waste fields in general, is composed primarily of nasty, disgusting bacteria. Meanwhile, Alolan Grimer is moreover made up of chemicals or synthetic materials, while also fitting oil in there, considering that its rainbow-like color is similar to that of oil, and we'll talk about that more when we talk about Muk. This connection, though, seems to still be the base driving point, as we know the Cantonian Grimer and Muk can be described as pretty dangerous and willing to intake endless amounts of their food choice. This follows through with the Alolan counterpart, as they are perpetually hungry and must constantly eat trash. If no trash is readily available, it will eat other manufactured products instead. And in addition to garbage, Alolan Grimer preys upon Trubbish and Garbodor, its introduction to Alola causing their populations to decrease within the region. And I realized that I must have been caught in a game of telephone or merging information in the past, because I now realize there's nothing that I could find that states directly that they were imported to directly hunt down Trubbish and Garbodor. And yes, I understand that they are trash, but Pokédex entries have not shied away from stating when another Pokemon was intended to hunt another. It might be a moot point, it might be separating thin straws, but at least it's important to understand that this is them hunting the Trubbish and Garbodor, or this idea of them hunting these trash Pokemon down may have been more of a byproduct rather than the intended purpose. There are usually about 100 Alolan Grimer found living near waste disposal sites in Alola, assisting people in dealing with garbage, and they are widely used and very popular Pokemon for garbage disposal facilities around the world. Part of me wonders just how much this does help with lowering the garbage pileups and the potential danger of the toxic crystals, but at least with those tiny crystals, they are fairly contained, or can be fairly contained, and can be stored away until they are broken down, or can be broken down. Maybe they are never meant to be broken down because they contain the worst parts of the toxic materials and they can't be transformed or reused. As it does evolve into Muk though, the crystals are more abundant, seeming to form claws or fangs upon their bodies. Its vivid coloration is a result of the garbage it eats, which causes chemical changes in its body. Said body contains over 100 different kinds of poisons, and chemical reactions of different poisons occurring within its body is the source of Alolan Muk's vitality. And there is our confirmation. Regular Muk is refuse, your bowel movements, primarily since they live within sewers most abundantly. They are biological reactions. Meanwhile, Alolan Muk is artificial. They are the chemical reactions that occur. Both versions contain the dangerous materials that compose their bodies, but unfortunately, they will release some of it into the areas they venture through. But even as we look at regular Muk, it does release a stench that others believe is a good thing. That is because a stench is usually a sign that something is breaking down, something that is decaying, rotting away. And so Muk itself is breaking down what already exists, which may have originally been much worse than the horrors that we know Muk can currently create. I've got to say, I've always loved poison and ghost types, with fairy types really making their way up as third in my favorites, but the more I learn about how the poison types are inspired, created, and affect the world, the more I fall in love with them. Back to Alolan Muk again though, it is unexpectedly quiet and friendly. However, if it is not fed trash for a while, its hunger will compel it to destroy its trainer's furnishings for food. It is thought that it cannot maintain its energy without a constant source of toxins, which causes its voracious appetite. The crystals covering its body have a tendency to break off, which makes it extremely difficult to deal with due to the concentrated toxins contained within them. It is often stated that you should not touch these crystals, as it will afflict you at a mere touch, but nothing is said about them breaking down in an unstable sense. So I do wonder if you literally could just handle them like radioactive waste. Sure, there would be a couple steps to it, but it might be actually a lot easier to handle, it might be safer, and overall take a lot less space than people might imagine, in comparison especially to just letting garbage pile up. Plus, there are plenty of chemicals that even I have handled that you should just really never touch directly anyway, so it's not like this is unheard of, as I spent months getting very familiar with diluted hydrochloric acid for cleaning materials that were used for phosphorus testing. And even with it being highly diluted, it was still something that would make you feel like your skin is burning after no more than 3 seconds of contact with it. So there's got to be a way around these toxic crystals, somehow, some way in the future. Get Clement on this. And to close out, the oil slick appearance that gives rainbow colors is what is produced when a thin layer of oil floats atop the water, which is what we see on Muk. This is a phenomenon called thin film interference. And of course, oil spills are a major threat to ecosystems in the world's oceans. Anyone who has driven with me, which is none of you, would know that I would genuinely rather be tortured than ever even step into a BP gas station for the things that they have done in the past in relation to their major oil spill from many years ago. A major oil spill that is suspected and relatively proven to still affect people and animals to this very day. I have a very strong rage about it, and I'm literally just gonna have to take all that rage and channel it into a video on the second channel with the full history of it, because fuck you, BP. My mini justified temper tantrum aside, Hawaii has faced many different major oil spill problems throughout history, and in 2021, there was the Red Hill jet fuel leak, which even went as far as tainting drinking water and making thousands of people severely ill, ironically, a mere 5 years after the release of Sun and Moon. Not that this would have had any effect on people who handle oil, but nevertheless, still ironic and a bit sad. And as one more tangent before we move forward, I often describe learning ecology as something that is innately depressing at first. Everything is dying. That is the way of the world. But unfortunately, we are speeding things up rapidly through the actions of the masses. But what's important is to realize that we do have the power to choose to help the world, help the animals, and even the people around us, because we are all one singular unit that does rely on each other both directly and indirectly. It's very much the story of saving one starfish at a time and making a difference that way, making a difference in that starfish's life as it was trapped on the beach and you throw it back out to the water. This honestly made me miss some of my favorite instructors during my time in high school and college for that matter, because they're such happy people despite circumstances, but they're realistic and aim to save what they can. They continue, in my memory, to inspire me greatly, not to say that they're dead, and all I can really say to all of you who are listening, do your best out there. You affect more lives with even a simple gesture than you may believe, and I'm gonna get off my soapbox and we're gonna move on to the next Pokemon. Alolan Exeggutor. This is the one that I know when I made my very first long-form Pokemon video in this style that I did not do justice. And now I bring to you a more complete understanding of Exeggutor and how it likely originated as a species from Alola. This is because there are ancient carvings and murals that depict it in its extremely tall state, while there are no other records that are stated to exist within the world of Pokemon regarding it or any of its other currently known forms. Also, there is an entire island that has a bunch of these Pokemon while also being shaped like Exeggutor, so that feels pretty definitive in terms of this being their home region. It has also grown this tall due to the abundance of sunlight in Alola, allowing them to grow 5 times taller than in other regions, which this catches my eye because while Alolan Raichu can be found in the Lental region, this Exeggutor can't. So there's a very small part of me that wonders if Necrozma's light, which does shine abundantly upon Alola, has affected Exeggutor. That would even help tie it into the idea of it gaining the dragon typing instead of just staying a psychic type. Though they can be found in the Blueberry Academy's terrarium, so do with that information what you will. Maybe the UV lights there are incredibly powerful. Nevertheless, the region of Alola is considered to be the best for this Pokemon at the very least, and now it more closely resembles a coconut tree or tropical palm than what we see in other regions currently. It even now bears an extra head, which works as a scout, considering the other heads are so far up high that they can't really keep a good eye out for anyone that is sneaking around, and if they get too close, that would be a pretty big problem. This extra head can act on its own, and it does defend the rear by using weak telepathy to also scan the area. Otherwise, Alolan Exeggutor here will use its long neck, similar to a giraffe, and whip the ever-loving Arceus out of its enemies with its hard head. Though the neck itself can also be a very weak point, especially if it swings it around too much, which may cause it to get dizzy. The explained reasoning for it changing types is because it no longer needs the psychic power to defend itself, now awakening its draconic powers and weakening the psychic abilities it did have, which makes sense as the Exeggutor we are familiar with originally can't do much other than try to clumsily headbutt you, in which case it'll probably fall over. Otherwise, psychic power really was necessary for it to defend itself properly. Now, with the dragon typing, it is likely a reference to the Dracana genus of trees, and I would like to point out that the Dracana Hawaiian Sunshine cane tree, more specifically, is likely the inspiration. Their long bodies with a very palm-like sprouting at the top really makes me think of our Alolan Exeggutor, especially considering the emphasis it has with sunshine being part of its name. Again, just as one of the inspirations, though we also know that these bad boys are coconuts, so there are 2 additional ties we find there. One is that others have stated a dragon, whose name is Coca, shares the same origins as the word coconut. Otherwise, with coconuts, we find that they either float along the water to new locations, or other humans brought them to their new homes. Some homes work and they were able to grow. Other homes are less a home and more of a dinner plate, as they are just an imported fruit. After all, you're not going to sit here and try to grow a coconut tree in the cold reaches of Canada. We can even support that this was originally the case, as in Kanto you can't find them unless you go to the Safari Zone originally, but eventually changes happen, and in Generation 2, you can start finding them in Kanto outside of there. Though when we look at other locations in which we can naturally find them, outside of the many areas of Kanto and Johto within the Gold, Silver, and Crystal games, we find them on coastal areas, such as Route 18 as a swarm in Black and White, or Route 12 and Azure Bay in X and Y, even within the sea-based areas of Galar, making it as though all these Exeggutor really did just migrate across the water to these coastal areas as, you know, a coconut might. In other words, it seems as though they were naturalized within Kanto and Johto by Generation 2, but are otherwise just migrating over the waters for any other region that may have them. Our final entry for Alola is one of the most deserved evolutions in all of Pokemon, with our Fire Ghost type Alolan Marowak bringing the heat to everyone and everything that dared to threaten it as a Cubone. In the Alolan region, Marowak was faced with an abundance of its natural enemies, Grass-type Pokemon. This harsh environment led it to bond closely with its friends, which is said to have created a sort of sixth sense and caused it to take on a new form. It customarily mourns its companions by burying them and dancing in mourning. And while I mentioned it in my previous video, allow me to share how our animals in our world will do the same, burying their dead. And just as a warning, this will be short, but a little bit sad. In 2024, Asian elephants have been documented deliberately burying the bodies of their calves, in the first scientific report of such behavior in this species. 5 buried calves were discovered in drainage ditches on tea-growing estates in North Bengal, India, all with their feet and legs protruding from the ground. Footprints and dung of various sizes indicate that herd members of all ages contributed to each burial. Night guards at the estates reported loud elephant vocalizations, sometimes lasting as long as 30. Oh, that just made me really sad. 30 to 40 minutes before the herd left the area. African bush elephants have been observed covering dead bodies with vegetation and returning to these locations later. However, the Asian elephants in this study generally avoided returning to the burial sites, instead using alternative pathways. This is the next level of understanding emotional intelligence with animals, and there is far more that I need to talk about regarding this in a different video. Of course, burial is important when you live in the same area, as it helps deter bad smells and disease if done properly, but elephants are known to travel long distances, meaning that they may not even come back here ever again, and as we heard, some do. But either way, it would be effectively useless to bury a body that you will not come in contact with, that you don't have to worry about because you're not going to go near it again. Yet, they do it anyway. And here we are with Alolan Marowak providing that same level of emotional intelligence to its allies, not just its own kind. Also, if it wasn't clear, the reason I got sad there with the vocalization is because they're crying. They're crying and mourning. And I have a very soft spot for animals, if the entirety of this channel doesn't tell you that. Oh, I thought I'd be okay. I thought I'd be okay reading that, but nope. Nope. Moving on though, Alolan Marowak rubs the bone it wields against its forehead to light the ends in a green flame, and then twirls the flaming bone. The flame is made from the spirit of its deceased mother, who has transformed into a vengeful spirit that will then protect Marowak. It specializes in an attack where it releases a weak ball of flame from its bone that will relentlessly pursue its foe. Alolans would fear it as a conjurer due to its rarity and the fearful sight of it dancing with its bone. The dance is also used as a way of mourning for its lost allies, and once its flames have spread onto an opponent, they're impossible to put out with water, causing both mental and physical pain. and I gush about this every time, but the fact that it has created a flame that cannot be put out by water due to the water surrounding the islands is one of the most powerful adaptations any regional form has ever managed. Of course, inspirations draw from fire dancers to the Polynesian concept of mana, which is the spiritual essence that exists in all objects and people. This allows people to imbue their spirit into other people or objects for protection or vengeance. I do find it very interesting that a Marowak in other areas is not raised by the mother, almost as though the mother understands her child will go through hardship, but that the child will grow up and be fine one day. Meanwhile, the mother in Alola sees the pain and sorrow that her Cubone will not be able to triumph through alone, and instead of moving on to the afterlife peacefully, she becomes this spirit determined to protect her child. She bears a wrath that is transformed into flames and harnessed by this Alolan Marowak as it calls her, as it rubs the bone against the skull of its dead mother to call her back to this mortal realm. And together, they even protect the lives of others who may otherwise succumb to other harsh Pokemon. I'm sorry, my voice cracked there. Still thinking about elephants. I'm gonna have to take a moment to myself. As one final note about the elephants, it probably wouldn't hit me as hard were it not for the fact that my grandmother, her favorite animal is an elephant, and then my significant other, one of her favorite animals are elephants, with dogs and cats being way up there as well. So there's probably a couple reasons why that hits me way harder than I expected it to. Not that either of them are gone, bless, but you know, the subconscious reasoning. We've now crossed the seas to Galar, and deep within the depths of the Glimwood Tangle, we find our variant of Ponyta and Rapidash. I think it's important to first understand that the Glimwood Tangle, otherwise known as the Luminous Maze Forest, is a place filled with primarily fairy or psychic-type Pokemon, with the exceptions of Phantump, Pissimian, and Sinistea, two of those even being ghost types. The forest is very reminiscent of magical woods in which you will find yourself getting lost, especially if you're on the search for something that you should not have. Here within these woods, Ponyta have wandered, and after generations of being exposed to the life energy found within, their bodies changed, now becoming a psychic-type Pokemon. It is chalk white, and instead of flames, its mane, tail, and fetlocks are covered in a long, purple and blue, fluffy fur. Its eyes are purple with light blue irises, and it has a small purple and white horn on top of its forehead. Ponyta has become a tried and true unicorn through the strange magic found here. Even further though, it can absorb the life energy located in the atmosphere and store it in its mane, which will then become more colorful and potentially release a shining glow if there is a lot of energy for it to use. It has healing powers and can heal any slight wound with a few rubs from its horn. By looking into the eyes of a person, it can read the contents of their heart, and if it were to find any form of evil within it, they will promptly go into hiding. These powers going even further to allow it to send pleas of help in the form of visions to people, even if they're in an entirely different region. Most of this is really just classic unicorn legend stuff right here, nearly one-to-one. Though some stories have it that people would hunt down the unicorns in order to take advantage of their horns that are cure-alls. A panacea, if you would. I should really learn how to say that word. Either way, this would also explain why they are hiding away in the Glimwood Tangle, because otherwise these people would hunt them down and cut off their horns, which is very much like what happened in real life in the past with animals such as rhinos, despite there being no actual health benefit from consuming their horns, and is something that some idiots still decide to do. It's ultimately that horn is just over-glorified fingernails, as they are made up of keratin. I'll also say this also just kind of reminds me of the unicorns from Gravity Falls that were incredibly full of themselves and just absolute jerks. But at least these Pokemon seem to be nice and friendly and the real deal. And it is noted that the unicorn is the national animal of Scotland, which is the inspiration for the Crown Tundra, as well as being part of the United Kingdom, the country that Galar is based on. and when it does evolve into Rapidash, it gains the fairy typing, its horn grows incredibly long, in which it can actually release its channeled energy into the move Psycho Cut, which can punch a hole through sheet metal. Its fetlocks are adorned with long pink fur that stores away psychic energy, which gives it its swift, airy gait, and it has deep violet hooves. When using psychic energy, its horn glows with a yellow aura, and its colored fur glows with seamlessly flowing color. It lives in forests and is known for being brave and prideful. I spoke a little too soon about them being nice and not overly prideful. My bad. But funny enough, there really isn't anything else left to state here regarding their inspirations, but this affirms that belief that life energy is a big part of what makes up fairy-type Pokemon, or rather their control or infusement of excessive life energy. I'm gonna say it now, the entire Slowpoke line is S tier, just absolute top tier Pokemon for me. They're just so unfortunately tortured no matter what form they take after Slowpoke, but they just don't really care. In Galar, Slowpoke's diet consists of eating spices, more specifically the Galarica nut. This in turn will result in a change in Slowpoke's behavior and the shift of Slowpoke's tail from sweet to spicy. Much like its Cantonian counterpart, it is known to relax on seashores and riverbanks without a care in the world. Oh, to be a Slowpoke in a modern day. However, sometimes it will get a very sharp look in its eyes as if it is about to think of something tremendous, although it will quickly forget and return to its normal expression afterwards. Me too, buddy. It is believed that this behavior, along with the spicy taste of its tail, is a result of the Galarica particles built up from its diet of native Galarica seeds, affecting its brain and its body. This diet also affects Slowpoke's two different evolutions, including the shelter that attaches to it, which is induced by either the Galarica cuff being put on its arms, or the Galarica wreath, which is put onto its head. Due to the scent of the spice emanating from its tail, the Galarian Slowpoke often has difficulties while fishing. They have no interest in eating such a thing. Now, there is an actual real-life explanation and real-life logic as to why Slowpokes become more spicy, or how its evolutions become more aggressive and agile, how it could be in more pain without the shelter's help, and I want to bring all of that here before we talk about Galarian Slowpoke's line further, as it explains everything and sets up a good foundation, even how the shelter will feel bliss and eventually faint from what is noted as poison. This is all because Galarica nuts are derived from nutmeg, which allows us to learn the following. Nutmeg contains a chemical called myristicin, which is responsible for the quote-unquote high caused by nutmeg. Myristicin is found naturally in the essential oils of certain plants, such as parsley, dill, and nutmeg. However, you would have to consume an awful lot of nutmeg to get high, from around 2 tablespoons up to a whole container. According to a recent study from the Utah Poison Control Center, consuming just 1 tablespoon of nutmeg can cause a high, and once again, Acrylic VA does not condone the use of nutmeg to get high, especially as consuming so much myristicin can be very toxic. But this perfectly explains the chemicals in our Pokemon here. The National Institute of Health even notes the symptoms of nutmeg poisoning to be respiratory depression, hallucination, drowsiness, tremor, and tachycardia, which some of it you could argue presents itself in this Slowpoke line here. In Galar, Shelter will bite onto the arm of Slowpoke to allow it to evolve into Slowbro. This in turn causes a chemical reaction between the Shelter's poison and the consumed Galarica spices in Slowpoke's body. And now, the Shelter has a purple tip, which is not a sentence that I should say like that ever again. This version of Slowbro is considered incredibly dangerous, as it will indiscriminately attack its surroundings whenever the Shelter unconsciously bites down hard on its arm. The reason for the biting is so that way it can absorb the poison from Slowbro's body, allowing it to feel bliss. Because again, this Pokemon is basically getting high on Galarica nuts, which in turn may cause Shelter to pass out from too much Galarica nuts. I get one more of those if I so decide. I get one more. But back on track, if the Shelter does pass out, this means that there's no poison being pulled from Slowbro's body, which means that it will build up and cause severe itching. So there really is no winning for Slowbro. While normally zoned out when facing a strong opponent, its body becomes stimulated, and it will sport a sharper expression. Galarian Slowbro attacks by grabbing at its Shelter's tongue, causing the Shelter to fire poisonous liquids from its tip. It attacks at speeds rivaling the quickest of known reflexes, which I suppose you could tie back to the tachycardia, the case in which the heart beats at over 100 beats a minute, and as we know, if you're an anime character and your heart beats faster, you are going to move faster. Imagine that, geared to Slowbro. Though if it evolves into Slowking, the bite on its head causes a different chemical reaction due to the Galarica spices once more. Its body changes drastically, and now the Shelter itself has grown to dominate the Slowking. Even when the Shelter is removed and placed on Ash's head in the anime, it even takes him over completely until it's knocked off again. So, you know, don't go wearing Cloyster from a Slowking at any point in time. And amongst the many horns on the Shelter, there are purple tubes that excrete poison. In exchange for completely losing self-control to the Shelter itself has its intelligence skyrocket, which, yeah, that means that there's no actual trade-off here. Shelter just wins no matter what here. But it is because of this spike in intelligence that the Shelter can control Slowking. This also results in its psychic powers being able to rival the power of other psychic Pokemon. To put that into perspective, Slowking itself is already incredibly intelligent and powerful. So is Oranguru in terms of psychic power, as that is one of its rivals. Alakazam could be added in there alongside a number of others I will not mention. This chemical reaction has caused Shelter, this cute little yawning monster that uses its tongue as bait, to become so intelligent and powerful psychically that it, specifically, can rival traditional psychic Pokemon. Galarian Slowking has been observed chanting mysterious spells and incantations in battle, or to communicate with each other. It also chants these spells while creating strange potions using its internal toxins. What these incantations and spells mean has yet to be fully understood, and this brother is just speaking in Minecraft enchantment table. Also, I've come to learn that its potions are used through its ability as well, Curious Medicine, which is when it scatters medicine from its shell and causes all stat changes for your allies to be removed. This goes for both positive and negative stat changes. And this plays into what it actually does, as it is capable of creating potions by mixing toxins through the food it consumes. These potions are derived and secreted from the poison and the holes on Galarian Slowking's horns. However, not even Galarian Slowking here will have any idea what the effects the potions it produces will have. It will administer the potions it creates to any weakened Pokemon it sees, which is horrifying, and I have always called it a war criminal, but it may be more akin to the mad scientist that claims they can cure any disease and just slams down Yzma's collection of concoctions onto them, which is pretty fitting for our little warlock of a Pokemon here. Here's another really fun one, and Galarian Farfetch'd is a deeper shade of brown with a more prominent black mark on its head and a much more unfriendly look to its face. The leek it carries with its wings is much larger in Galar than the leeks that Farfetch'd use in other regions, although whether it is related to the large leek used as a curry ingredient is unknown. Galarian Farfetch'd's body has developed a much stronger frame that gives it the strength required to carry said leek. However, this sheer mass makes it very hard for it to fly. It is renowned for its courage in battle and can use its leek like swords or javelins. As a result of it surviving and experiencing many different battles, it will eventually develop the ability to evolve into Sirfetch'd. So far, this one is very easy, as leeks in the United Kingdom are known to grow to be larger and thicker than leeks in Japan. I assume this is still the case unless someone is adding metric tons of plant steroids to their crops to create the mother of all leeks. The leek it carries resembles the giant Musselburgh, a larger variant of the spring onion that was first bred in Scotland, and the wild leek, one of the national symbols of Wales. Galarian Farfetch'd itself may be inspired by a hammer throw athlete given the way it wields its leek, such as swinging it in a circular motion during its attacks. We also get it throwing the sword over its shoulder, similar to what we see a lone samurai doing in media. Cue Zoro in the third One Piece mention in this video. I'm not obsessed, I swear. Now, its relation to the gallant or White Knight, comes forth once more when it does evolve into Farfetch'd. Its wings serve as humanoid hands with the feathers at the end resembling fingers, which is a little creepy, but it carries a massive leek in 2 parts, wielding the long sharpened stalk as a lance and using the hard leaves as a shield. Farfetch'd is known to be calm and collected, preferring to fight fairly. Due to its noble nature, it is often chosen as a motif for paintings. One famous painting in the Galar region shows a Farfetch'd dueling with an Escavalier. The leek it carries is its most prized possession, being used as both weapon and food, and is maintained for many years, though when it finally withers, Farfetch'd will retire from battle for good. And this actually all relates to a real-life phenomena, so I quote from BBC. Knights must face mortal perils. This one's chivalric opponent is a particularly slippery beast, a foe often found sneaking along in their margins and engaging noblemen in deadly combat. Sometimes the creatures appear to be hovering, these snails, attacking knights in mid-air. Occasionally, there is more than one. This is the uniquely medieval phenomenon of the fighting snail, and to this day, why they were depicted remains utterly mysterious. Marginalia artworks are those found in the margins of books. In the Middle Ages, once the text of a manuscript has been finished, the most exclusive might receive a final flourish. Intricate borders of curly foliage, fantastical creatures, and other assorted drawings. Sometimes these were added immediately, and sometimes many decades later, they were added. But they were no casual undertaking. Often painted with precious pigments like lapis lazuli or highlighted in gold. These were very, very, very expensive books with very small numbers of readers, says Clark. So to clarify, these many different depictions of knights and snails fighting wasn't just some random dude doing this to every book like a form of graffiti. This was part of their publishing. This was done as part of the book itself or added in, and odds are only the most rich of individuals would be getting their hands on these, let alone commissioning the creation of this margin art to begin with. Continuing with the direct quote from BBC, for a brief period in the late 13th century, illuminators, those who decorated books, across Europe embraced a new obsession, fighting snails. For a comprehensive study of these warring gastropods, the art historian Lillian Randall counted 70 examples in 29 different books, most of which were printed in the 2 decades between 1290 and 1310. The illustrations are found across Europe, but particularly in France, where there was a thriving manuscript production industry at the time, says Clark. This snail knight is an example of the world turned upside down, the broader phenomenon that produced a lot of different medieval images, says Marion Bleak, a professor of medieval art at the University of Chicago. The basic idea is the overturning of existing or expected hierarchies. It is supposed to be surprising, even funny. However, whether these drawings had deeper symbolic meanings beyond this status flipping remains extremely funky. The knight ought to be brave and strong, able to defeat all enemies, but yet he cowers in fear in front of a snail or is even defeated by one. From here, one of the leading explanations is simply that the fight between the knight and the snail may represent the fight against cowardice. For a knight with no gut will fear all that oppose him and not be able to protect his country. Nevertheless, the explanation for this phenomena is up to debate, as we may never truly find one singular answer. And this all, of course, played back into the history of Farfetch'd. Also, its name in Japanese is Negiga Night, which mixes the words for spring onion and night together, which this is also potentially a pun on Nejiganai, meaning must have a spring onion. This is essentially a further play on Farfetch'd and its name, as its name in Japanese is Kamonegi, which is an abbreviation of the proverb Kamo ga negi no shotokeru, which means a duck comes bearing spring onions, which is a saying for when there's an easy target or a golden opportunity. And I have also realized I really need to brush up on my Japanese pronunciation of things. Not only does Weezing appear within Galar sporting a new form, but it even appears within Pokemon Legends Arceus on the Survey Core building, where it represents the industrial advancement that happened after the Edo period. This advancement happening at a faster rate thanks to Britain and Japan trading with each other amongst many others. This was the Anglo-Japanese Treaty, but it goes much further than that, as Japan was being encouraged to open its ports and trade with other nations. Now, within Galar, Weezing has changed due to absorbing polluted air from factories. Meanwhile, once again, a regular Weezing would be absorbing fumes from decay or microorganisms like bacteria. So we see once again how Pokemon have taken in pollution from natural and artificial sources and have had their bodies adapt to be able to absorb them. The difference once again is that Galarian Weezing becomes a Pokemon capable of cleaning said air. Its Dugtrio head constantly releases purified air instead of droppings, as it consumes particles from consumed air after sending it through what looks like air scrubbers. But it is noted that any puffs of green gas seen around it is still toxic. These green gases are accumulated and regularly leak out, and I've attributed this to a number of different ideas, but I realize this could literally just be a pun on greenhouse gases. Said gas is its best weapon in battle, being potent enough to stun and immobilize an opponent with just a whiff. Now it has added Trubbish fumes to its diet because Trubbish is created through a chemical reaction that occurs within man-made garbage, and it does let off its own separate fumes. While I did say it as a joke as I related it to Dugtrio, when we look at similar people to him in the real world, we have these chimney hat wearing Victorian era British men, facial hair and all. These were of course typically rich noblemen, and this ties even further thanks to its ability neutralizing gas as a pun, potentially, for noble gases, the gaseous elements that are highly unreactive and typically used to prevent unwanted reactions from occurring. Lastly, we could tie this Pokemon into the heavy smog that afflicted London during the Victorian era. There's a lot going on here for Galarian Weezing, and it's moments like this that make me really love how subtle the references can be in Pokemon. I say knowing that it has this massive, smokestack on its head, but either way, small note, I do feel a little bit stupid, as I had mentioned in a previous video that I doubted Weezing was made up of mustard gas, but its Japanese name is literally Matadogas, which is the breakdown, or if we did break it down, are the words mata and dokugasu, meaning mustard gas. I just, kind of figured it was too heavy of a gas for Weezing to have in its body and still float, but I guess it would need to be able to create it in some capacity in order to also sink at will, and for posterity's sake, mustard gas is not a naturally occurring gas. As I talk about Galarian Mr.Mime and Mr.Rime, I'm going to do my best, but these are some incredibly vague or super niche details that I often struggle to find. So if you have information on them or other Pokemon, please let me know, because whether it is in support or against what I have stated, I want you to bring some solid reasoning and proof, because everything I find is as factual as I can make it, and again, I can learn from you just as much as you can learn from me. I am one guy after all, but Galarian Mr.Mime is more visibly set for surviving within colder environments, while also being able to control the temperature of the area around its feet, as it is able to also create a floor of ice. It'll then kick up ice to act as a barrier for itself. It is known for its tap dancing within the Galar region, which is in contrast to Mr. Mime's known talent for pantomiming. It is through Mime Jr.'s admiration of Mr. Rime that it evolves into this Pokemon. And when it evolves into Mr. Rime, the growths on its head have now formed into a bowler hat while still bearing them as horns. And it will never not be weird stating that they are growths, because it is not actual hair to our understanding. Even in the Detective Pikachu movie, you can see how they're just kind of textured differently instead of it being like fur or hair. This Pokemon is just incredibly strange, but I do appreciate them, especially Rime. Now, its torso seems to bear the design of a face, and it is highly skilled in tap dancing, waving its ice cane while moving with grace. It is popular due to its amusing movements and teaches Mime Jr. its own dancing steps. Finally, through the face on its stomach, it is able to release psychic powers. It seems as though others have tied the connection of Rime to the famous silent film actor Charlie Chaplin and his iconic tramp character, and I gotta admit, I should have realized that a lot sooner, and I feel a little bit ashamed. Now, the entire getup, from bowler hat to large dress shoes, cane, and mustache, all line up perfectly, while also taking place in the Galar region, which is inspired by the UK, being Charlie Chaplin's home country. It's perfectly laid out in front of us, and if I did not look at what other people have presented, I would not have figured that out because brain fart. Now, the last notable piece is that it may also be inspired by the Haradashi, a humanoid yokai with a large face on its belly that is known for visiting people who feel sad or lonely in order to cheer them up. Sometimes this is done through dancing. I would show you the Haradashi, but it is just straight up a naked lady with floppy breasts. Nevertheless, I share with you from yokai.com the following information and not the image. Haradashi is a goofy-looking yokai that can change into various different forms. Occasionally, they will appear as a headless torso with arms, legs, and comical facial features on its belly. Other times, it looks like a kind elderly nun or a goofy female monster with long black hair. Whatever form it takes, the defining characteristic of a Haradashi is the large, silly-looking face which appears on the creature's enormous stomach. And unlike most yokai, Haradashi do not do anything harmful. They are cheerful and agreeable yokai, and enjoy amusing others and cheering people up. They frequently disguise themselves as ordinary humans and then use their belly faces to surprise people and make them laugh. It's actually kind of adorable when you don't think about how this creature might look from time to time, as, you know, they will actually entertain people who might be drinking alone. They'll accept a drink from those people, and they'll go as far to help people just completely forget their troubles and their worries, and instead fill them with hopes and dreams. The Undertale community is coming for me right now. I'm going to be trampled. And with so many Pokemon being lovingly inspired by yokai, it would make perfect sense that there's always the chance of yokai influencing even just the design or behavior of our beloved monsters, as we see here. The trio of legendary birds have their own forms in Galar, and the strangest part is that we simply don't know 100% for sure if these are actually regional variants, if they changed forms, or if these are just wildly different Pokemon that are simply just named after the Cantonian versions that we are originally aware of. First debuting in the Crown Tundra, each of the legendary birds received a Galarian form, known collectively as the legendary Wings. These forms share the secondary type, flying, but they each have different abilities and their respective primary types have changed. In Galar's Crown Tundra, the original legendary birds were thought to periodically travel there, but it is eventually discovered that the trio of birds seen there were in reality Galarian variants of the original trio that traveled all over the world, but annually flew back to the Crown Tundra's Dynatree to feed on its berries and even fight between themselves to have the berries for themselves. Not much is known about the relation between the Galarian and Cantonian birds, but their Pokédex entries imply that the Galarian ones were either the birds' original appearances or that they are unrelated entirely. I was under the impression, usually, that it was the other way around, but Bulbapedia might actually have a point here. The reason why I'm inclined to agree with them is because we already know that the Cantonian versions are regaled as the bringers of spring, summer, and winter for Zapdos, Moltres, and Articuno in that respective order. In addition, the shiny versions of the Galar birds match up to our Cantonian variants. I've also had it in my head that there were multiple of the legendary birds, but what if there really is only just one set in the main game's canon? We can also add in the idea that these three legendary birds represent autumn when put together, or rather, them being missing from the Kanto region would denote autumn. This is when they would return to their home within Galar, they would eat the Dyna Fruit, a unique tree that I am confident was created by Calyrex, and then the three are restored to their true, full-powered forms. After all, each one is essentially a souped-up but altered version of what we already know. Starting with Moltres, it is a dark flying type now. The flames that are on its body are more magenta, denoting a colder flame than what we see in its Cantonian form, which does line up, as Galarian Moltres is said to be lukewarm to the touch, though that's only if you touch its skin. Please do not touch the flames, those are over 500 degrees, and they will burn you, and in fact do much worse, as the sinister energy that blazes from its body is so oppressive that most Pokemon can't even approach it. When it attacks by spreading its wings wide, it releases an energy through a powerful aura that attacks the minds of its foes, inflicting deep fatigue as it burns away the energy within them. The aurora has the power to consume the spirit of its victims, reducing them to burnt-out shadows of themselves. And as seen in the anime, the only way to overcome the effect of its aura is to just simply have a very strong spirit. It is said to have a haughty personality and a calm demeanor. I will also note, I don't think the two regional versions of this trio of Pokemon are seen together ever. Not in the anime, not in the games, not in the manga, nowhere. The only strange thing is how its body changes to be more like a cormorant, though we've also seen how wildly a Pokemon's form can change between regions, or evolution, or otherwise, making it a very believable possibility. I mean, look at Hero Form Palafin, that's a pretty dramatic change. Backing up to Zapdos, it's more akin to Ratites, a group of birds that cannot fly and typically have long necks and long legs if you exclude the kiwi. You could also consider the secretary bird as an inspiration for its powerful kicks and the roadrunner for its running speeds. Now, it is belligerent by nature and constantly thirsts for battle, and it now harbors the fighting type, seeking out opponents stronger than itself so that way it can test its might. Its powerful legs allow it to perform devastating kicks capable of destroying a dump truck, and it can run across mountains at up to 180 miles per hour or 300 kilometers an hour. It can only barely fly, but its movements are so swift that they have been compared to a lightning strike. Thus, we get another explanation as to how it would have gotten this same name as the Cantonian version, making all of this that much muddier to solve. Finally, for Galar's Articuno, when it utilizes its psychic power, the entire mask glows the same color as its eyes, as do the white feather-like blades of condensed psychic power at the edges of its wings. It keeps itself airborne with said psychic power, being a flying psychic instead of being a flying ice type. It almost never has to use its wings for the purpose of flying. Instead, the blades on its wings can be used to slice through iron as easily as paper. Its eyes can fire beams of psychic energy that leave its opponents stuck in place as if frozen solid, once again giving it the same name of Articuno. It also has the ability to create mirages of itself in order to fool its opponents and escape. Its elegant and refined movements belie a cold and callous personality, and I'm not necessarily, now that we've finished getting those details out of the way, going to solve this, as this is just simply my speculation, my own thoughts and belief as to how this might all work. Now, the similarities between them all go beyond name and the overlapping of abilities, because the original birds were also very aggressive with each other, moving to take over each other's territory. They're territorial and hostile with other Pokemon and even people from time to time. They seek isolation, and that also explains the locations we find them in within the games. Mind you, the Dynatree is also pretty well isolated, and even if we just look at their base stat totals, they match perfectly, with the only exception of swapping the numbers around. Otherwise, the numbers are exactly the same, and if we stop to think about how base stat totals swapping would affect a Pokemon visually, I'd say it makes perfect sense to assume is that our birds are eating the fruit, they return to their true form, and over the next couple of seasons, while they are gone and traveling the world, they lose these forms and need to come back to eat the fruit once more. This would also even explain why people thought for so long the Cantonian birds were seen and coming back here, because they did see those birds. They had just simply run out of whatever magical essence was stored within the Dynafruit that it was using within its own body, or they were using within their own bodies. So I'm very willing to believe that our legendary Pokemon here do break the mold and become their regional forms for a limited period of time and just return here every year. Here comes one of my absolute favorite regional variants in the top 3 for me, I want to say, as we have Galarian Corsola. I mean, how can I not love it? This little gal represents all that is depressing with environmental science while still showing how life persists in a new form. Due to the sudden changes in the climate and ocean temperature, Corsola within Galar were wiped out completely. This is a real thing in our world called coral bleaching, which does result in our coral dying. Not to, accidentally tell you that all of our coral has died, but a lot of coral has been bleached, and it's going to take a long time for the coral reefs to even recover. But at least within the world of Pokemon, Corsola itself, when bleached and dying, does return in some capacity as a ghost-type Pokemon. Now, incorporeal branches appear and disappear at will, revealing the holes in its shell. They cannot cause injuries or pain, but they can be used to take root inside and drain the life force of others, like a parasite, and will immobilize the victim until Galarian Corsola lets them go. I'm sure it only wishes to grow as it once would have been able to long ago had it not died. And if it wasn't clear, Galar has had a lot going on, both natural and unnatural. Climate change and global warming are real. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. They are natural processes of the planet that happen in cycles. Though the danger is how we as humans have affected the planet throughout the years through industrialization, the chemicals we sprayed in the air, and so much more than I can explain properly here. And through unfortunate misinformation in the past, it's caused a lot more issues, and for people to believe that this is a political talk. It is not. Environmental is not political. Either way, it's because of these things that climate change and global warming speed up, putting all living things at risk as they cannot adapt and evolve within their environments. And even Pokemon knows this, as the Pokédex does directly state sudden climate change has caused this. I'm just saying, if you don't believe in climate change and global warming, you're my enemy, and I will make you the butt of every single joke I can anytime I have the chance. Does baby also believe that the earth is flat, or do you believe that it's a donut? Anywho, Galarian Corsola are commonly found in the remains of prehistoric seas, and while they can be mistaken for ordinary rocks, they will curse anybody who kicks them by accident. They consume spirit energy from the life force it absorbs, and this diet eventually causes Corsola's shell to break, its body to become incorporeal, and its spirit energy to pour out, thus completing its evolution into Cursola. And by Arceus, that is sick. I mean, look at the monstrosity. It's so sad looking, and I can't even give it a hug because it would kill me. Its body is broken, revealing its true body, I assume, to be this expanding ectoplasm that surrounds the true core of Cursola or Corsola. I now imagine that this core is the actual 100% true Corsola, no matter the form, meaning that this is technically our coral polyp. Its overflow of ectoplasm is the result of a long and continuous process of absorbing spirit energy from other creatures. The ectoplasm causes anyone who touches it to become stiff like stone, very much like what Medusa would do, or a basilisk in Dark Souls. Cursola can be seen wobbling while wandering, possibly because it enjoys being so lightweight, meaning that it can move a lot easier these days. They are known to gather together under a full moon and send their branches into the sky. The reason for this is unknown. One hypothesis suggests that it is a ritual of release, shedding the energy they've gathered from others, while another hypothesis posits that this is a form of communication between Cursola. And I do believe I have found the reason, or rather, environmental scientists have found the reason because they studied it in the real world, and I can now tell you how the moon actually affects coral. From coraldigest.org, I have the following. The moon contributes to many important factors among reef organisms that help those ecosystems grow. Moon phases, light, and cycles each play a part in the process of coral spawning and species fertilization. There are other characteristics such as water temperature and water acidification that help with this too, but without the moon, many organisms would struggle to fertilize gametes and grow into larval fish successfully. Some organisms also rely on the moon to cue other behaviors essential for survival. For example, many species such as the manta ray, zooplankton, and isopods migrate to the shore, which creates a great environment for both prey and predators. The prey seek the moonlight to identify predators better, and the predators use this false sense of security to lure their prey out. Unfortunately, the effects of pollution have also played a role in destroying reef ecosystems by causing ocean acidification and the rise of temperature. It is essentially our responsibility to limit these variables and allow for the maximization of reproduction and growth in marine ecosystems. And that's just the abstract of the article, the TLDR if you would. I would like to remind you of the connection between space and heaven as well, and as such, Cursola could be raising its arms into the air and caring very much, as it both communicates for reproduction and sends spiritual energy into the heavens. I just love them so much. I mean, especially regular Corsola. I need like a little mini Pokemon statue of them just sitting around in my office one day. Another one I actually just love talking about is Galarian Zigzagoon, not only because it is factually better than the original Zigzagoon we're aware of, but also because Galarian Zigzagoon is the original Zigzagoon. Also, come on, look at that adorable little face. Don't you just want to pick it up and bring it home to be friends with forever? Well, if you do, then you and I would both be part of the reason as to why Zigzagoon changed from the Galarian form into the one that we see within Hoenn. This is because they enjoy battling but will not attack first. Instead, they will provoke others into fighting them. And while this succeeded with other Pokemon, we as humans simply thought they wanted to play or wanted affection, which only frustrated it. No, I am evil, fight me! Do not love me! I do not actually, if you could keep scratching right there, I suppose I won't rip out your entrails. This bad boy with his tongue lolling out is known to be constantly on the move, never settling down. And it is through this temperament that we continue to see the same zigzag movements in the Hoennian version. Their habitat stretches the entirety of Galar, and this is because it is the Pokemon that has thrived the best in such a harsh environment. Think of it this way. Hummingbirds basically never stop. They're always moving, hunting for their nectar, and avoiding predators, and despite their small size and perceived weakness, they are very effective and specialized towards what they do. Translate that now to an omnivorous creature like Zigzagoon, who has a wide array of foods it will eat for its diet, whether it be in the city or wide open fields. It can travel vast distances when food is scarce and can avoid other predators with ease thanks to its confusing movements and great speed, all while it gets stronger from provoking attacks and retaliating in order to win any battles that it starts. This conqueror of the Galar wilds will eventually evolve into Lanoon, who is, of course, just better at what it does. Though they are known to be rash and fearless, preferring to recklessly challenge opponents that are stronger than itself. Lanoon is also known to use its long tongue in order to taunt opponents. Once the foe is fully enraged, Lanoon will hurl itself at them, tackling them by force. These traits make it very popular among unhappy and angry youths in Galar who have nowhere to take out their anger and frustrations, which is your Team Yell reference right there. By charging at up to 60 miles per hour, it can deliver powerful tackles and headbutts with enough destructive force to even knock away a car, though it will be thrown off balance were it to ever miss one of these attacks, which, you know, gotta say, just being thrown off balance from missing an attack is not that big of a deal. There really aren't that many Pokemon in the areas in which it resides that are faster than it, so it could probably make a couple of mistakes and still get away scot-free. The harsh environments in the Galar region, along with the fierce competition among the species, allows Lanoon's survival instincts to improve, leading to the ability to evolve into Obstagoon. While combative to the extreme, it doesn't attack often, as it prefers taunting an opponent into attacking first. What then happens is that it will then use its signature move Obstruct, in which it threateningly crosses its arms and lets out a staggering yell so loud and obnoxious that it would cause any opponent to flinch. They're also known for their duels with Pangoro because, you know, that's the other delinquent Pokemon. So it transforms from what is labeled as the tiny raccoon Pokemon into this badger Pokemon in terms of its overall appearance. And let's just say that badgers can be pretty freaking nasty, but that is primarily because they can be incredibly defensive and highly territorial. It does depend on the badger, of course. In this case, we have the European or Eurasian badger, which is classified officially as an omnivore and has very few enemies while normally being docile until cornered, in which they do become extremely aggressive and ferocious, making them dangerous for any predators who think they could just make an easy meal of them. Apparently, they also commonly live amongst foxes, specifically red foxes, in isolated sections of large burrows, which is a little cute until they decide to fight with each other. To another point, of course, this trio is inspired by glam rock bands, more specifically Kiss itself. But when we think of their transition from this aggressive creature to the Hoenn Zigzagoon, what happened? Well, it simply was a Pokemon that was brought into new lands where they had no natural predators. They may have been invasive at first, but also may have been naturalized and are now a common part of the ecosystem without causing damage. As they realized less Pokemon were fighting Zigzagoon, it likely lost much of its energy and aggression from the need to survive, that it then lost access or even the need to evolve into Obstagoon while still maintaining all of that energy, which is why they zigzag or are very, very restless even in Hoenn still. This is something that will occur with a number of other Pokemon losing these evolutions, such as what we will learn with Weirdeer. The last point I can speak of is that raccoons in the real world have undergone a weird sort of change where they can technically be classified as two different subspecies depending on who you talk to. This is because they have learned to enter human settlements, adapting to them and becoming city creatures. This is because while most other animals are neophobic, scared of new things, the raccoon is often stated to be neophilic, loving or more interested in checking out new things, meaning that they are more willing to take risks even if there is no reward, purely because of their curiosity, which I feel that energy big time. Time for another Pokemon that was dramatically affected by climate change within Galar, as we have Galarian Darumaka. Really turned that smile upside down, didn't we? It now sports a thicker coat, colored white, and due to the seismic shift in the Galar region long ago, the region itself cooled in terms of climate. Darumaka here adapted to this, and as the fire inside them went out and their fire organ atrophied, it gained an organ that generates cold instead. This is very important. The organ did not change, it did not disappear, it just atrophied. It simply decreased in size. The colder Galarian Darumaka gets, the more energetic it becomes. They can focus their internal energy to breathe out cold air in the form of snow, which they then use to make snowballs for ammo in playful snowball fights with each other. They will also enjoy eating berries produced by Snover, which may lead them to prey upon the little pine tree, often causing them to in turn be driven off by Abomasnow. I don't think that they straight up eat Snover, but they just might get a little too aggressive with the poor pine tree from time to time. When it does evolve into Darmanitan, it has now fully developed the organ that produces cold air while the flame sac stays dormant. This in turn has caused its nature to change from belligerent to gentle and timid. Think of all the fire-type Pokemon that you know, how they move with great haste, they're active, they have strong or even aggressive personalities. This isn't their fault, they just have a lot of energy, hence the flames erupting from their bodies. Then think of many ice types. They're usually calm, isolated, or timid creatures overall. Slower moving creatures who are in no rush whatsoever. It's important to note that Pokemon typings do play into their personalities or general behaviors, and Galarian Darmanitan can become so timid that it will even pretend to be a snowman when it senses humans nearby. It uses the snowball on its head to store food and other things it finds, preserving them for later, and when in battle, it freezes its giant snowball in order to release powerful headbutts. Now, these are very Zen creatures with Buddhist inspirations, hence the Zen mode that it can have as a hidden ability. As such, there are a couple of ties that can be made between it, Buddhism, and further into Dharmic religions through its beard and headpiece, which is formed by the crystals lining the diameter of that big ol' round head it has, which kind of want to touch because I kind of imagine it would be soft and squishy like a beluga's if they were in warm environments, which they should not be in anyway. When it does have the Zen mode ability, we have trouble though, as it becomes the only current fire ice type Pokemon, and I keep saying current because I could just feel that Legends ZA will end up releasing a fire ice type or a grass electric Pokemon at some point. When Galarian Darmanitan enters Zen mode, its dormant flame sac reignites back to life. This causes its disposition to change into a maddened, rampaging state. It hops around in battle and unleashes fire everywhere without any care for its surroundings, nor if its body starts to melt, making it a threat to others and itself. And it will continue rampaging indiscriminately until its rage is completely gone or it is calmed down. I trust that I don't need to explain how bad that is for this Pokemon, though I do wonder if the flames would actually completely melt it down to nothing, or if it would just, faint. Have I said how much I love regional forms enough yet? Because Galarian Yamask and Runerigus just hit a soft spot for me, and you'll find out why very soon. With our Yamask, it is said to have been born when that tablet was drawn to a vengeful spirit. The tablet bears cursed engravings that resemble a serpent's tail and is said to absorb Yamask's dark power. This process, brought by an ancient curse, triggers Galarian Yamask's evolution into Runerigus. It and its evolution are the only Pokemon currently known that have the Wandering Spirit ability, in which instead of cursing the opponent with the ability Mummy, it flat out swaps abilities with the offender who used a contact move, thus creating another Wandering Spirit or a new curse for daring to touch the tablet. Now, this idea of the tablet comes from more Vikings within the world of Pokemon, as we have inspirations from runestones, and to pull from a site that is literally named after Viking archaeology in Europe. From the end of the 10th century to the beginning of the 12th century, roughly 3,000 runestones were produced in Scandinavia. About 140 of these were in Norway, 400 in Denmark, and 2,400 in Sweden. What had once been reserved for the very top levels of society had become relatively common for the upper middle classes. These runestones could be non-zoomorphic or zoomorphic in nature. Those that were zoomorphic had decoration in Ringerike style or in earnest style. The inscription usually begins by stating who had the stone erected and in whose memory it was made. These inscriptions include both pagan and Christian dedications, those with a Christian cross tending to be earlier in the sequence of Christian dedications, as if it were important to show that the person was Christian. Later Christian dedications tend to end with a simple prayer. These stones bear animals, serpents, religious symbols, and final accounts of the people who had died. But this goes even further, for if you are to disturb these stones, you are said to incur the wrath of a curse upon yourself, tying perfectly back into our ghost Pokemon here. Of course, though, it doesn't just stop there, because in order to evolve it into Runerigus, it needs to take 49 points of damage and be brought to the large stone arch in the dusty area of the wild area. The arch that is very similar to that of a dolmen, which is also called a portal tomb. The dusty area that has what is also meant to look like a stone ship. And no, not a literal ship as I once thought it meant, but rather a ship setting, which was an early burial custom in Scandinavia, northern Germany, and the Baltic states. We can see that the monoliths in the area are in the general shape of this. Finally, the number 49 relates to the Antarabhava, a Buddhist concept of purgatory after death and before reincarnation. This process of Buddhist purgatory is said to last, of course, 49 days. This might be one of the most contrived ways to evolve a Pokemon, but I cannot help but love it, because my own beliefs, in brief, are mixed between non-denominant Christianity and Zen Buddhism, but I love learning all of the different cultural and religious stories to expand my horizons. Now, as it does evolve into Runerigus and now bears not only a symbol similar to that of any other stone that we would then find or we have talked about, but rather it bears the markings of a serpent, that which we can tie into the world serpent itself, Jormungandr, an unfathomably large and monstrous sea serpent or worm who dwells in the world sea. It encircles the earth and it bites onto its own tail, which is an example of an Ouroboros. And what is something that the Ouroboros represents? Death and rebirth. It comes full circle, literally. Runerigus was formed from a painting imbued with an ancient curse, which was activated by absorbing the spirit of a Yamask, and it brought the painting to life. Anyone that touches its shadowy body will have the memories behind its painting's creation, which is a horrifying vision forced onto them. There really isn't anything left to say here. This Pokemon is reincarnation beginning to end, a transformation through death in every single way, and you are the one to carry it through the portal grave that then evolves it. I didn't expect it, you didn't expect it, Galarian Stunfisk did not expect it, yet here we are with its regional form that is now a ground steel type. It cannot generate electricity, but the high iron content of the mud it lives in has strengthened its fins, which have been adapted into an apparatus akin to a bear trap. It leaves its red and white mouth along with visible sharp teeth, which look similar to a Pokeball, visible to lure in prey, and then slams its fins shut on them so they cannot escape. And yes, it does claim that those are fins directly from the Pokédex itself. And to really drive it home, they gave it the ability Snap Trap. Ultimately, this is an adaptation that I used to claim would solely be to take advantage of humans and our wants to just, pick up a Pokeball, but it's more than that. As with all of our other Galarian Pokemon, this Stunfisk has adapted to withstand the incredibly harsh conditions and has expanded its diet. The wider the diet, the more of a chance a creature can survive conditions in which one food source runs low. This was one of the major drives that helped a lot of ancient animals survive, as they also may have developed jaws and molars, at least as we know of and as we suspect. So sure, I'm positive our bear trap Pokemon would absolutely snap down on our ankles or wrists and murder us in cold blood, but it would only do so just so that way it could eat us. Not in a malicious manner, it is for survival. That doesn't really make it sound all that much better, but we're done with Galar, and I'm ready to move on to Hisui. Alright, Hisuian, Growlithe, and Arcanine. We've got a lot of legendary lore regarding them, and an explanation for the rock typing in lore and an inspiration. The fur it does have on its body for Growlithe and Arcanine are both made out of igneous rock components. This form is a result of it being exposed to volcanic activity within the coastal highlands it lives in during Hisui's early times. Hisuian Growlithe's soft and insulated fur allows it to survive the cold weather of Hisui. Although its horn is made of rock, it is fragile and breaks easily, so the Pokemon rarely uses its horn unless it's absolutely necessary. Hisuian and Growlithe live in pairs and are known to be vigilant when guarding their territory. Hisuian and Growlithe also takes much longer to bond with humans because they have lived apart from humans for a long time. Simply put, the volcanic activity that it lives around has allowed the pyroclastic material from volcanoes, which includes igneous rock as part of its components when it erupts, to collect in the fur as part of this Pokemon. But before we explain further, let's just run through Hisuian Arcanine's information. Just keep the whole idea of guarding in pairs information in mind for later. Hisuian Arcanine uses its fangs while engulfed in flames to snap at foes. Despite how deceivingly bulky Hisuian Arcanine is, it moves around nimbly like a dancer. This allows it to lead opponents in a merry chase while avoiding them at the same time, and it lives in the coastal mountainsides. Now, as time would go on, these Pokemon would be taken in by people similar to how ancient canines would be brought in and changed to be the lovable monsters we have in our homes. This evolution from wild to tamed would result in Growlithe losing the rock typing, partially because of the change in climate and partially due to how it doesn't need to stay so heavily insulated as it becomes a common household pet. No, that isn't to say it's impossible to find them out there in the world somewhere. In addition, from their appearance to their behavior, they represent the Koma Inu, and I present information from yokai.com again. The Koma Inu are noble, holy animals usually employed as guardians of sacred sites. They can range in sizes from a small dog to the size of a lion, and due to their resemblance to both creatures, are often called lion dogs in English. They have thick, curly manes and tails, powerful, muscular bodies, and sharp teeth and claws. Some Koma Inu have large horns like a unicorn on their heads, however, many are hornless. All of this matching up incredibly well with our large-maned dog, curls and all. The only difference is that we find our Pokemon bearing stripes similar to that of a tiger. But how do the behaviors of the Koma Inu match up with our Pokemon? Well, the Koma Inu are known to be fierce and noble beasts. They act like watchdogs, guarding gates and doorways and holy sites such as the entrance to Shinto shrines and preventing the wicked from entering. They live together in male-female pairs and are always found together. In their pairs, the female usually guards those living inside, while the male guards the structure itself. Koma Inu were brought to Japan via Korea, which in turn received them from China, which they in turn received them from India. China is where they first began to symbolize the dharmic philosophies of Indian religions, and in China these dogs are called shishi, which means stone lion. This name is often used in Japan as well, though it only refers to the ones with their mouths open. The shishi is also brought to life through dance performances, which is why we get the information regarding the Hisuian form having dance-like movements, which we primarily see in the big ol' noble fight we have with it. This could not become any more clear just how heavily inspired these Pokemon are and why they are considered legendary in China. Though I do find it a little bit funny that they technically originated from India as a gift, meaning that if we do ever get a region based on India, I expect to see a super ancient version of our big old boofer here. It's not a new day, I just simply needed a break and a shower because I've not recorded a video this long in a very long time, and I'm not splitting it up into multiple videos. Because, you know, you guys like super long videos anyway, and that's what, you know, That's just what I do. But moving on, when we see Hisuian Voltorb and Electrode, it should immediately raise the flag that this Pokemon is not actually the ball itself. And after digging into the information, I have a feeling that you might at least be willing to mark what I'm about to say as a possibility when we get to it. Now, Hisuian Voltorb, like its modern counterpart, resemble the apricorn-made Pokeballs of the time period. Both appear to be made out of grainy, wood-like substances with a glossy surface and a hole on top. On the inside, Hisuian Voltorb's body contains numerous seeds, but it has been impossible to examine its interior due to that interior being pitch black. While I would love for this to be our reasoning behind why it is a grass type, there is a reason as to why it loses this typing when it becomes a modern day Pokeball. And that is because these Pokemon aren't the ball, they're some sort of unseen creature. This could be the electricity itself, similar to Rotom being plasma and possessing electronic appliances, or it could be something we just simply have not seen and may never see. This would explain why they're so willing to explode, to self-destruct, because there is no actual risk to its life. That isn't its real body. After all, Pokemon has always put a pretty strong focus within the anime and in the manga to some capacity that a Pokemon exploding does not mean that it is actually dying. Moving forward with Hisuian Voltorb though, it can store electrical currents in its belly, which it discharges all at once from its hole. That sounds really wrong. But unlike Cantonian Voltorb, Hisuian Voltorb have friendly and excitable temperaments, which leads them to cluster around people, causing them to be a nuisance when they discharge, and it is known to let out a great uproarious laugh whenever it does discharge, which is a bit terrifying. Imagine just hearing a Voltorb's laughter immediately behind you. You know that you're probably not making it out alive. Somebody should just like make a little Pokemon horror game where that can happen, please. I love horror just as much as Pokemon, and I need some good crossover games for October. Come say hi in the streams. Anywho, there are also stories of people temporarily plugging the holes of Hisuian Voltorb to prevent them from discharging before removing them from their settlements. It has been seen in Paldea during the rare mass outbreak events, and that lines up perfectly, as you can get apricorn balls in Paldea, giving Voltorb a home it is most comfortable and familiar with in the modern day, or at least what it was originally comfortable with. In terms of inspiration, there are traditional Japanese fireworks that are spherical in shape with shells made of paper mache. The insides are often made with rice husks, and the open hole is where the fuse would go. But in the case of our Hisuian Voltorb, the cap of the apricorn is no longer there, or rather wherever that section of the apricorn ball is no longer there, meaning it was unplugged in order for Voltorb to enter it. And of course, if it takes over Pokeballs, the modern day ones, those just open up nice and easy from the center, no hole necessary, and it closes back up no problem. So out there somewhere, some sort of Mexican jumping bean-like creature that is the true Voltorb and Electrode that, again, we have not seen. Hisuian Electrode now bears the big ol' angry frown, and when angered, it can unleash an electrical current equivalent to about 20 lightning bolts, it says. It can also absorb and store chlorophyll energy along with electricity. Once again, we might be able to say that the real Pokemon is a creature that takes advantage of types of energy and might be made up of it. It can not only release this energy through the hole on its lower half, but it can also just straight up climb trees. When you see an armless, legless creature just zoom up a tree, you do not ask any questions. Instead, you run. It will strike from above like a cougar, except way more devastatingly. Also, I gotta say, the direct Pokédex entry stating the fact that it can release power equivalent to 20 lightning bolts is quite wild. I couldn't find a resource for information that could accurately give me consistent amounts of how much energy a lightning bolt has. Some of the calculations would let an incandescent bulb be powered for a year. Some resources would mean that a whole household would be powered for 56 days, and yet another resource would give me a wattage that I calculated out to be able to allow a house to be powered for 255 years. It's almost as if nobody has been able to reliably capture the amount of energy a lightning bolt gives off because it's dangerous to do so, especially if the amps and volts are too high and it overloads whatever system they're testing with, resulting in a potential fire, if not explosion. As such, it's all estimates, and our Pokemon here are just beasts of electricity. Energy from Mount Coronet radiates a spiritual power much like what we see with Lanakila. But instead of transforming Typhlosion into a psychic type, it has instead gained the power to see and cleanse spirits, becoming the first channeler and gaining the ghost typing. They're so adorable to me until you get the terrifying animations of it actually attacking before it emits all 108 of its ghost flames from its neck to incinerate you into nothingness. Not even dust will remain after it has attacked. This is not me flowering up my words, that is exactly what its lore states. It also states that the flames take the shape of ferocious beasts. Finally, it is known to be graceful, refined, and gentler when compared to Jetonian Typhlosion, often seen staring into space, assumedly as it searches the flow of life energy in the area for wayward spirits, and then seems to consume them, when in reality it is just purifying them, as it can also do with its flames before guiding them to the afterlife where they belong. Now, 108 should sound incredibly familiar to you, because this is also the number of spirits that make up Spiritomb and is the number of beads in a Japamala, or prayer beads. The individual markings on its neck are akin to Magatama, comma-shaped beads that are highly valued ceremonial objects. They were attached to many things. The most important for us to know in this moment is their placement at temple shrines and used as funerary objects. And where are they placed? Around the neck of Typhlosion. So add that to the idea of it consuming spirits, and the body of Typhlosion itself serves as a portal to cleanse these spirits and send them to the afterlife. Hisuian Typhlosion is truly a powerful psychopomp, an individual who guides those to the afterlife, and there is suspect that it may be based on Kamui Fuchi, who is the Ainu goddess of the hearth, the Rising Fire Sparks or Rising Cinder Sparks woman, and the People Teacher. She serves as keeper of the gateway between the world of humans and the world of the gods, or Kamui. So you can kind of see more and more where I get this gate idea from. And it is through this that I would even suspect that this Typhlosion taught people how to use spiritual items and brought about the age of psychics and channelers within Pokemon. This would eventually lead to less spirits being around in the world as they were laid to rest, and Typhlosion would eventually lose its evolution. What were these spirits? Well, I would claim that there are 3 different possible groups of spirits that would be in unrest during this time. One group would be general spirits that are disturbed by what is happening during our time in Hisui, the great conflict that is bound to tear apart both humans and Pokemon, with both being Arceus' chosen children, humans and Pokemon that is. I say that because Arceus granted the noble Pokemon to humans in order to ensure that we are all even and don't get absolutely decimated by wild Pokemon, as per the old verses. Our second set of spirits would be the Hisuian Zora and Zoroark. They are truly wandering spirits after all, and they don't exist in the modern age to our knowledge, but we'll explain them more later. Our last set of spirits has an entire side quest that takes the entire span of the game to even complete, and that would be Spiritomb itself, the Pokemon composed of 108 evil spirits, and it was forced into the stone to repent for its sins. Though, unlike the real story within the water margin, these spirits have yet to repent and instead have broken free from their encasing to cause havoc once more. These spirits were likely far too malevolent for Typhlosion to purify, and as such, it simply sealed groups of them away for the sake of others. Lastly, its special move Infernal Parade is very reminiscent to me of any time the undead walk upon the earth again. This could be for good or bad, as there are Infernal Parades revolving around demons, and then there are other parades more akin to Dia de los Muertos, where the dead reunite with the living in happiness and joy for remembrance of those who have passed on. I would not be surprised if these spirits are similar to what we have seen with Alolan Marowak, and that they join with Typhlosion to help purify others and bring peace in a land full of conflict. Another incredibly unassuming Pokemon is Qwilfish, but its transformation from a dark poison to a water poison type is the most significant piece of information we have that adds even more to confirming the time period in which Hisui takes place. Because originally I would have always stated that Hisui, or our time in it, takes place within the Edo period. But it actually takes place in the transition between the Edo period and the next period of time. Hisuian Qwilfish is despised by the fishermen of the Hisui region due to its poison wreaking havoc in the seas it lives in. Its poisonous spikes are thicker and shorter than Qwilfish from other regions, and this form absorbs poison from the food it consumes. The purple coloration on its body serves as evidence of its potent poison, and in the present day, they can be found offshore in cold parts of the world and in Blueberry Academy, located somewhere in Universe Ocean, specifically in the terrarium's polar biome. So they clearly like the cold. They are still possible to see in the modern day, and they've adapted from this form that just stabs people to one that will fire its quills at others and then do its best to swim away. In addition, that whole bit about it like creating poison from the food that it eats is basically what a real pufferfish does. So, you know, direct inspiration is really cool to see here. But it is during this time period in real life that the pufferfish was deemed illegal to eat. Of course, this is because it is so incredibly poisonous that you're guaranteed to die if you weren't treated, and there were no treatments for pufferfish poison at the time. And actually, to correct myself immediately, there is no known antidote for tetrodotoxin. There is no known antidote for tetrodotoxin poisoning, according to the National Institute of Health. In other words, once you eat it and you are unable to vomit or cleanse the system professionally, you're gone, even in the modern age, which really makes me rethink whether or not I actually want to eat fugu. I love my family far too much to risk something so simple and out of my control. But fugu is supposed to taste amazing. Nevertheless, that does bring me to my next point, because during this transition of time, chefs began figuring out how to serve pufferfish, or rather fugu, in all of its umami goodness. As a result, fishermen would actually directly hunt pufferfish, despite the many times that a ban was placed onto them. The illegal fugu market would then continue to thrive, and the rest is history, as it would eventually become, well, not illegal. I could have just said legal. You really can't ban humans from eating or drinking whatever they want. I mean, look at prohibition. We will always find a way around laws that try to dictate our diet. This is just the way of humanity. This would also have a direct parallel in the world of Pokemon, as Qwilfish would be hunted more and more until it realized that it could no longer use its current tactics to keep predators away. Finally, it would evolve traditionally into the Qwilfish we see in Johto, but there would still be the cold water enjoyers out there in the world who were never hunted in excess, meaning that Hisuian Qwilfish still exists out there. And these Qwilfish would have access to their evolution, the pin cluster Pokemon Overqwil, who has a very aggressive personality along with a short temper, which has given it the nickname Sea Fiend, and its diet straight up consists of poison. Brother just doesn't eat rotting things, he just straight up consumes poison. That's gotta be bad for his stomach and the areas in which it defecates, which I just imagine, even though it's in the water, it just releasing defecation and it burning a hole through multiple floors of a building. Overqwil's poisonous spikes will react automatically even while it sleeps. The barbed spikes then stab any moving thing that approaches it, and once the barbed spikes have punctured a target, they cannot be removed so easily. Again, because they're barbed at the end of them. It just kind of looks like it is constantly puffed up more than anything, and it has also been compared to a naval mine due to its ability to learn self-destruct, which, if you're an island surrounded by water and you need protection, water mines make pretty good sense, as Japan did use them quite a bit. Bearing down upon the mountains of Hisui in a new form, we have Sneasel, who is a fighting poison-type Pokemon and looking a heck of a lot more stylish. Its claws are tipped with poison, but they are also sturdy and curved just right to allow easy climbing or general traveling through the walls of steep cliffs where it lives. The venom from said claws are capable of invading the nervous system of its prey, and it is through their lack of spitefulness that they are distinctly separate from the Sneasel we find in Johto. Making this more interesting is that we do find our Johtonian Sneasel in the modern day Sinnoh, which is what Hisui is. So what's happening here? How did one become the other? The only assumption I can make is this, and it is further based upon what we see with Avalugg later on. Because the lands of Hisui had the massive never-melt ice, and even though we see beach sides like the Cobalt coastlands, the lands overall are stated to be colder than modern-day Sinnoh is. As such, we can attribute the idea of normal global warming occurring, and the ice that covered the many mountains would lessen until eventually Sneasel would not need such extreme claws to dig into both ice and rock. This is not to say our modern day Sneasel is not adept at climbing, but it is definitely not as strong of a climber as its past Hisuian form. They also aren't as heavily hooked and are now more fit for climbing bark more than anything else. I'm also not entirely sure why Sneasel became more spiteful over time. It could just be unhappy with the modern conditions and wants to make it everyone else's problems every single time that God forgets to kill them in their sleep. More realistically, due to the climate shift, there's simply a very good chance that it lost most of the Pokemon that it would normally hunt and had to expand its diet, adapting more and more just so that way it could survive. And only the hardiest of creatures would stay and thrive through this climate shift. So this means that, Sneasel would not be able to fight such ferocious creatures and survive as easily itself. As a result, it then changes its tactics to attack eggs, giving Sneasel a meal and lowering the population of Pokemon that threaten its life as it eventually becomes a dark ice type we are very familiar with. All because that's seen as a very underhanded tactic. I mean, they are, attacking eggs after all. Though, one other fun part about this is that they are likely inspired by the Kama Itachi, otherwise known as sickle or wind weasels, who ride upon the wind itself and will use their claws as sharp as razors to rip through your bodies. Razor Claw really tying in that idea real nicely, since that is how we evolved Sneasel to begin with. But these yokai were often said to exist in the cold mountains, meaning that they were representative of myths of the way a cold gale would hurt our skin. And as we are about to find out, Sneasel was said to be the most powerful Pokemon on the mountains within these lands, where the cold was much stronger than it is in the modern day. Sneasel's evolution was the result of Hisuian Sneasel adapting to life on cliffsides in the frozen highlands of Hisui. Despite Sneasel's lanky build, it possesses great strength owing to its vicious claws. Due to its severe poison and deadly physical power, no other Pokemon species could defeat it in its habitat, and through using these claws, it is capable of climbing up walls and cliffs with ease. And unlike its counterpart, Weavile, it prefers to be alone instead of living in packs. And you might be asking me a couple of questions. One is, if it was the most powerful, then why did it change? Why couldn't it just stay in this form and beat the competition? Well, simply put, there was no competition that it knew. Because the ice melted, Pokemon better adapted to a warmer climate took the place of those that left or went extinct in the area, which means that new species are coming in, which are unfamiliar to Sneasler, and this would put Sneasler at more and more of a disadvantage thanks to the landscape and new Pokemon, forcing it to either adapt or die. While we don't have a location for it in the modern day, maybe we'll see it in solitude deep within the cold recesses of Pokemon Greenland one day. The Water Dark Samurott is here, who will eventually just become a pure water type in the future. I used to think that the modern day one was a water fighting type for some reason, which would be dope, but oh well. Now, its whiskers are wavy, as opposed to the straight whiskers of the Unnovan Samurott. The lower set of the whiskers are also longer, and the shell armor covering its head and limbs are black and have red accents. It is overall sharper, spinier, and its scimitars are wavy blades. It's almost as if this Pokemon is unkempt, abnormal, and a wanderer, which is exactly what Hisuian Samurott is, as it has become a Ronin within the lands of Hisui. I do want to clarify something very important as I speak on this, and that is that Laventon was the one to bring the trio of starters to Hisui. And while we can't suspect he comes from Galar due to his accent, there are characters such as Fantina who have a French accent, but have not been confirmed to come from Kalos at all. I don't know what happened to my voice for a second there. I don't know if the spirit of the French tried to take me over and failed because I can't speak French, but oh well. We also know that Laventon has traveled to a number of different regions, studying the unknown starter Pokemon and planning out the Pokédex. So where he got this trio from does not necessarily have to be from Hisui, which is also kind of shown because we get them from the time-space rifts, which I think is the only place we can actually get them. Though, we understand that Hisui itself is what helps transform these starters into their final state of being that is different from the original final evolutions we are familiar with. Now at Samurott, it is clearly a samurai, but remove a samurai from their mission, from the ones that they are meant to protect, remove them from their purpose, or maybe even banish them into the greater lands without a master or daimyo to fall under, and we have our Ronin. In feudal Japan, a Ronin was a warrior, a samurai without a master, who traveled the country offering his service to anyone in need of a sword for hire. But unlike the lonesome cowboy or gunman in Western movies, the Ronin in Japanese culture has always had a tragic dimension, a sense of failure. This was because being a Ronin was often associated with said banishment, likely because they failed their mission, and that mission failure likely resulted in the death of someone important. These masterless individuals are incredibly dangerous. They could be inspiring to some, they could be great people, but being masterless meant that they were essentially a tool to others, to whoever would pay them what they desire, or if they were seeking vengeance, nothing was going to stop them from getting their vengeance. After all, they're masterless. They don't have someone to tell them what to do. They are no longer cared for as they once were, and so they just might do whatever is necessary in order to live another day. And while a lot of this is very tip of the iceberg for Ronin, this is where Hisuian Samurai does come in. It is said to have a cold and hard-hearted heart and is deft with its shell blades. Unlike its Unovan counterpart, which prefers to fight fair, Hisuian Samurai will do anything to win a battle and prefers to use tricks, surprise attacks, and cheap shots. It remains still and silent until it sees an opponent. Then in a blink of an eye, Hisuian Samurai draws its scimitars and thrusts them at its enemies. It's just, doing the anime thing where it cuts the person down and 5 years later while they're drinking tea with their grandmother, they just get split in half. The attacks Hisuian Samurai unleashes are likened to the ceaseless crashing of waves and can confuse and overwhelm opponents. The wounds inflicted by them are said to take many years to heal. Now, I had to actually look into that and the reason behind it, and it's likely because cuts from sharp-edged coral and barnacles may tend to fester due to debris or bacteria introduced at the time of the injury, causing the healing process to take weeks or even months, but that's not guaranteed and it might just heal normally anyway. To be fair, there are a lot of things that just kind of give you a higher risk of infection dependent upon, a number of factors that I'm just not going to get into. And I really don't think, either way, Samurai's taken the time to wash its weapons before fighting. I don't know why we don't see them in the modern age, but it might just be because the Oshawott line is meant to stay within Unova to protect the lands for some sort of greater purpose. Maybe whenever we do remove them from the region as an Oshawott, we introduce the possibility of them transforming into their Ronin variant now that they wander the earth outside of their homeland, and only time and future regions will tell. Hisuian Lilligant is a strange one because I believe we have a mixing between mistakes that we as humans made in history and the transformation that was completed thanks to the change in the climate coming together to give us our alternate forms. Because the allium is a genus of flowering plants that include both edible and ornamental pieces. This includes the onion, which Hisuian Lilligant clearly is, and how it was once placed in the same family as lilies, my favorite flower, mind you. It is stated that its leaf-shaped arms and the white to pink gradient on its legs may be based on Allium victorialis, otherwise known as Allium ocotens, according to some authorities, a wild onion of ethno-botanical importance to the Ainu people. The plant is usually served with a bulb of Cardiocrinum cordatum, a floral plant in the lily family, in Ainu cuisine and folk medicine. To clarify, rather than how it is accidentally portrayed in real life as an onion, who was accidentally placed in the lily family and then was removed from it, Lilligant is an onion that straight up does become a lily Pokemon based on the history that we see here. Pokemon does this a lot, to be 100% fair. They will take typically masculine or feminine qualities and flip them, as we see with Reshiram and Zekrom. They'll make puns out of Pokemon, and they'll overall aim at doing the opposite of what reality dictates in terms of inspirations and in order to make their own spin on things. The scent released from Hisuian Lilligant's flower causes anyone nearby to experience a heartened feeling. Meanwhile, modern Lilligant gives off a relaxing effect, and I might be a little stupid because I didn't know what heartened was supposed to mean, but apparently it is to make something more cheerful or confident. I suppose this lines up with the confidence of performing ballet in front of people as we see through this Hisuian form. Hisuian Lilligant is suspected to have its legs developed as a result of living in the snowy mountains of Hisui, and they allow it to jump very high and gracefully. As we look at their designs, we can even see that it still has the same lily on its head within Hisui as it does in the modern day, but that lily has grown in the Unovan form, meaning that this Pokemon, over the years, has very strongly adapted to the warmer climate. Instead of focusing on its strength to move, It is adapted to instead intake more sunlight, staying in one place more often, and this will all result in larger green petals and eventually a greater sized flower. They still weird me out a little bit considering they are a female-only species, which yes, there are a lot of plants out there that are female-only by our standards, and then Unova and Lilligant do try to search for a partner anyway, but all grass-type Pokemon, or most of them at the very least, are in the same grass egg group and can breed with each other, so maybe I shouldn't overthink that. This one is pretty straightforward, and while we haven't seen them in the modern day in terms of their Hisuian form just yet, I'm sure they also exist somewhere out there in the outreaches of cold lands. The next one is arguably one of the most popular variants, and for good reason, as we have Hisuian Zorua and Zoroark. And allow me to present this as I have before, because it will really paint the picture of why their doomed fate came to be within Hisui. In the case of Zorua, it originally is very much modeled after the kitsune that delight in mischief, pranks, or evil. There are good-natured kitsune that exist out there that do protect shrines and interact with people, but Zorua is not modeled after those. Not to say that it is inherently evil, but you'll understand why the people of Hisui treated it so wrong. They trick humans, possess them, cause them to behave strangely, and even assume their forms as the kitsune live amongst us. Be wary of sharp teeth, claws, or the swish of a tail in the event that the person you're talking to becomes too passionate or gets drunk and they lose control of their disguise. One trick is to even say moshi mosh, as foxes don't have the ability to say it, with their jaw, revealing their secret easily. If you fail to notice them, they could ruin your life, hurt your loved ones, or even replace you next. These are the rumors of the kitsune, warnings and tall tales in our world, but within the world of Pokemon, they have tangible, truly 100% provable kitsune in the form of Zorua, who does all of these things. The only issue here is Zorua is again not inherently evil. It just likes to have fun and it needs food. So it is through this dissonance of information and fear, because they don't trust or understand Pokemon, that we have people act against Zorua, driving it out of their towns and into the harsh and unforgiving Alabaster Icelands. The winds whip at them, invisible icicles slicing through their fur with a bitter cold. No food, no water, no shelter. The elements are ripping them apart, and there is no love out there to save them in this world. And so the Zorua all canonically die out. But that bitter cold transforms their bodies, and as they die, they remember the pain that was caused to them only happened due to humanity chasing it with sticks of flame and pitchforks. And in a brilliant but horrifying transformation of anger, of malice, the Zorua is revived as a true ghost, a revenant on a mission. Hisuian Zorua is born as a grudge-bearing Pokemon who fuels their attacks with bitter malice. Their illusions can harm you now. Their kitsune powers have strengthened through their spiteful power and malice within their ghostly fur. This is all powered through the resentment of everything, just like a moody teenager, but actually justified. If it encounters a lone human or Pokemon, Zorua may appear to them masked in a horrifying illusion of their own likeness. It seems to draw strength from the terror it inflicts on its victims, and it tends to reside in the cold areas where it lingers onto. Like its Unovan counterpart, Hisuian Zorua can make its illusion of other Pokemon to the point of easily fooling anyone in order to get food. So you're probably noticing that even now, these horror stories, these tales of warning, are still in that sense of, oh, get them away. If you have the chance to push them away or run away, you do it. There's still that incredible fear here, and while it might be slightly more justified, it's just going to perpetuate this cycle of destroying the Zorua species and making it harder and harder to ensure that this variant does not happen again. And then once they do become Zoroark, they're so powerful that they will harm themselves in the process of attacking. They're said to be the embodiment of death, their illusions causing pain inside and outside of your body, breaking you completely. And it's all derived from its hatred for every living thing in the world. After all, it has grown to despise those that were allowed to live, while it has suffered, despite it just wanting the same things. The malicious power is so extreme that it may drive anyone who sees it to insanity through terror. And they are extremely hostile and aggressive towards everything naturally. But there is one thing that is very interesting to me, and that is simply that Zoroark, while rare, can make friends with humans. They then become a most invaluable ally. It is through this that I believe Hisuian and Zora, or at least the duo of them, do not exist in the modern day, only because eventually humanity learned that they were wrong in attacking the Pokemon. Kind of like what we see in the Hisuian Snow short series, which is, oh my goodness, it's so beautiful. And as the revenant that it is, these Hisuian Pokemon accepted the apology. Seeing humanity has changed, their rage then quells, and they peacefully pass on as they do deserve to. Thus, ends their existence and prevents them from existing in the modern day Sinnoh or for anywhere else currently. Even if they didn't just pass on and they do have regular biology in some capacity, then I would imagine that the Zora would never face such a harsh atrocity again, meaning their Hisuian form would rarely, if ever, be created ever again. After all, there are sanctuaries to keep Pokemon protected, and a lot of people just tend to understand Pokemon a lot better within their world. It seems as though the only reason that they took on this form was due to the sheer number of them that were tortured and were pushed out of their homes until they passed away, and that tragedy should never happen again, thus, once again, making sure that they do not return as this Hisuian form. Braviary has an ancient regional form in its Hisuian form. In Hisui, it grows even larger and have been known to be relied on by the indigenous people for personal transport across the skies. And unlike their Unovan counterparts, it prefers to live alone instead of in flocks. They travel to Hisui from the north during the winter season. When it hunts, it sends out blood-curdling battle cries, which can be imbued with its psychic power to generate shockwaves. Those shockwaves are then used to stun prey living underwater in lakes, causing them to float to the surface before it grabs them with its talons and rips them apart. Our bird here is dynamite fishing with its voice. Mind you, that is illegal and for good reason. It also uses its psychic power to heighten its sixth sense, as well as to enter a trance for a physical power boost. And one more time, say it with me, the change in the climate has eventually caused Braviary to lose its psychic typing and just become a normal flying type. What's interesting is that it flies south for the winter, landing in Hisui, and there is some implication that Unova is situated to the northwest of Sinnoh, which is Hisui. To add to this, Unova has a very shifting climate that is a bit more erratic, though how much of this is just the games and how much of it is just legitimate lore is up to question. I usually like to assume the more logical sense in the fact that it does have an actual shifting seasonal climate that is normal. Meanwhile, in the modern day Sinnoh, it has a more calm climate, something that's a little bit more steady, meaning that maybe where it's coming from, maybe the older Unova was a lot more cold, a lot more frozen, almost as if Kyurem might be up there causing a lot of havoc, and when it gets to winter, Braviary needs to leave. But eventually, as maybe it's not related to Kyurem, maybe it is, either way, maybe as things do become a little bit more temperate, as Unova kind of calms down and gets actual seasonal weather that isn't so horribly cold, Braviary does move up to Unova once Hisui starts to warm up. This would then work in twofold, for just like Zigzagoon, our Braviary would not need to use its powers as much to push itself to the extremes of strength in order to survive. In addition, when it starts warming in Hisui, it already has another home that it seems to enjoy, and one where they are well loved thanks to Unova technically being America, and apparently they are seen as a motif on a number of different emblems. Though I have to admit the Pokemon world is getting a little bit weird because they're starting to retcon certain things like Guyana just not existing anymore, so they're separating their old lore of Pokemon existing in the same world as ours more and more. Nevertheless, Pokemon has a vary in terms of their actual Pokemon, you don't use it, you lose it style towards their powers, and as such, Braviary loses its psychic abilities as it gets a bit more of a cushy life within Unova. Yet another Pokemon I would expect to see somewhere in the future, in another region. Another set that is actually very simple is Hisuian Decidueye and Goodra. When Hisuian Decidueye wants to move quickly, it will tuck its entire body into its shell, position the shell vertically to the ground, and just roll itself away. It can also use its shell to float on the water. It's theorized that the shell was created as a result of Hisuian Sliggoo's slime reacting with the iron-rich waters of Hisui, and both forms of Sliggoo can typically be found within marshlands or near bodies of water. It has been seen in Kitakami during the rare mass outbreak events. Now, this does differ from snail shells, as those are typically composed of calcium carbonate and a protein coating. And as stated from Carnegie Museum of Natural History, land snails obtain calcium from their environment in a variety of ways, depending upon their autoecology. They eat live and decaying leaves and wood, fungi and algae on wood and rocks, sap, animal scat and carcasses, nematodes, and other snails even. They can be found rasping old or occupied snail shells, bones and antlers, rock particles, or larger stones and outcrops. And the soil that they regularly consume contains calcium. In captivity, they consume lime and paper. Land snails also absorb calcium directly through the sole of their foot, and then they source that from Cato, 1960. And they just kind of make their shell from their bodies, kind of excreting it from themselves. And it all just depends on their diet, how pure or impure that is. So, sure, if a snail in real life could actually turn iron into their shell, they would. To follow this, Hisui's Goodra does have longer horns and can continue to use its shell as you would expect, only leaving its head out to inspect and observe its surroundings. It can even control the hardness of its shell at will. I'm not going to question that one. I don't know why that makes me uncomfortable, but it has a very clingy disposition and hates being alone to the point of becoming angry and rioting if its closest companions leave its side. Goodra baby, you may not be a poison type, but that's pretty toxic. There are a couple of proposed inspirations. One I actually missed was that they are actually likely based in partial to the scaly-footed gashapod, who does have a shell composed of iron sulfide compounds. Another being a common yokai legend where if an animal lives to be 1,000 years old, it essentially transcends and becomes a yokai. In this case, we have the Sushibora, or the Ascended Trumpet Shell Snail. It lives for 1,000 years in the mountains, 1,000 in the plains, and 1,000 in the sea, and after doing so, it will turn into a dragon. And where do we find this Pokemon? Within Hisui, in the Fieldlands, the Mirelands, and the Highlands are 3 areas representative of the plains, seas, and mountains, even though the Mirelands are what turns into the Great Marsh and the Lake of Valor, so it's ever so slightly off, but close enough to make the tie solid and for us to solve Goodra here. Long ago, I did not understand why Hisuian Avalugg was an ice rock Pokemon that turns into pure ice, but then after studying in college geology, just the entry level stuff gave me all I needed, it all began to click perfectly for me. So let's just start with its information and then I'll explain the reasoning. Hisuian Avalugg is noticeably smaller than its Colossian counterpart, weighing only half as much. Its entire body is made of brown stone, whilst its top, along with its head, are covered in a layer of solid ice. The head of Hisuian Avalugg is larger compared to Colossian Avalugg and has 2 large gray tusk-like plates on its lower jaw. These armored plates are stronger than steel and allow it to break through boulders easily and shovel through deep snow. They live in steep mountains and are known to be rather docile. And while glaciers themselves were generally much larger than icebergs, considering that basically every single iceberg that exists was also once part of a glacier, with some of those being continental in size, our Hisuian Avalugg is to represent but a piece of those glaciers. The pieces of glaciers it represents are the ones that broke off, the ones that did travel across our lands, the ones that would eventually expand and recess over and over and over again, gaining less and less distance until eventually they would break off and create the Great Lakes of North America amongst many, many, many other lakes, all while leaving behind any rocks that they may have picked up along the way. So yes, what I'm saying is that Hisuian Avalugg is the glacier that moved across the land, picked up massive rocks, and then deposited them throughout the lands of our world. This is exactly what happens in our real world. We can even study the flat expanses of rock for scraped lines that were caused by glaciers thousands of years ago. We can study what directions they were moving. The things they left behind could be small pebbles, they could be massive boulders, there's tons of possibilities, and sometimes the glaciers are the only explanations we actually have to explain as to how a rock that would have never been in the area, does not match the local geology, would have ended up where it is. Either way, eventually the Hisuian Avalugg we know will become rarer as the glaciers would melt away with the changing climate, and they would deposit whatever rock bodies they have whenever they would pass away, because yes, there is a very good chance that the Hisuian Avalugg have gone extinct. But in their place, the modern day Unnovan Avalugg continues to float about or exist within colder climates. And I just gotta say, I love that its signature move is Mountain Gale, being representative of these glaciers that move down the mountain, and as the wind would hit ice, it would only bring about colder winds. And gosh, this just made me miss my geology class so much, almost as much as environmental classes. We have reached our final Hisuian Pokemon before we travel over to the final region of Paldea to talk about not only the variants there, but also the convergent species. Though here in Hisui we have Decidueye being another Ronin of sorts. Compared to Alolan Decidueye, this one has a smaller wing area and thicker legs. Its head and neck covering are also red with orange and white accents, and together they resemble an Ayagasa. These are hats that were used by archers, of course, to shield their eyes from the sun and wind. Very fitting for this archer Pokemon. Though here it has more layers of feathers for insulation and would prefer to fight at close range in order to overwhelm enemies. Its legs can deliver powerful kicks that can knock down trees and destroy boulders. Their signature strategy is to fly towards its foes to unleash kicks, then unleash its hidden arrow quills in order to deliver multiple attacks in a row. So it isn't much of an archer yet, but the hat is still very useful. They're said to have a stalwart and fierce personality, although it will tolerate those who do not act hostile towards them. It has a nomadic lifestyle, wandering the Hisui region in search of food. My understanding of this is that through its fierce personality, it would fight far too much for its own good and would eventually just result in a number of their species struggling to survive. Add this to the warming climate and likely the need to stay more hidden from desperate predators who are stronger than it or have an advantage over it, and we will eventually get the Alolan Decidueye we are familiar with. I also like the idea that this is most likely its original form or its extinct form, especially as it fits the theme visually. It bears autumn colors, a season often associated with death. Meanwhile, Alolan Decidueye's form is green, fresh, similar to that to the rebirth of spring. And another Pokemon here we have that has been reborn now with the ghost typing if you follow this idea. Said ghost typing and their appearance being similar to that of the stilt owl, a bird that was endemic to Hawaiian Islands who has gone extinct. It is also stated that it might be inspired by the Chikap Kamui, the Ainu god of owls and the land. He is responsible for overseeing the behavior of humans and Kamui and is considered a deity of material success. Overseeing behavior checks out, through its stalwart personality, and the material success, I guess you could say, lines up with the Ronin style wandering, so I think we hit our bullseye. I didn't write that in the script as an intentional pun, but I am leaving that bullseye in, of course. I'm not gonna lie, I haven't done a video this long in like a month or so, and I am feeling it. It is now day 2, if you didn't notice it this time, and this is a very massive video. But I love doing these really long ones because it feels more rewarding than breaking it up between videos. But that aside, prepare yourself for Paldean Tauros. In Paldea, Tauros has 3 separate regional forms, being Combat, Blaze, and Aqua, and they are pretty well tied together in terms of their inspiration. The Combat breed has short, rounded, almost straight horns, and its mane and tails are shaped similarly to the Cantonian version. They are known for their thick, powerful muscles and aggressive nature, and thanks to its muscular body, they're skilled at close quarters combat, able to use its horns to strike at an opponent's weak spots. The Blaze breed has sharp horns pointed forward and bent at right angles. Its mane is spiky with streaks of red and its tails are intertwined. They earn their name from the hot air they breathe from their nostrils, and when channeling their fire energy, the bumps and horns on their head will glow red. The horns can reach a temperature of over 1800 degrees Fahrenheit or 1000 degrees Celsius, causing anyone gored by them to suffer both wounds and burns. Very, very interesting, you might note, that they use the word gore there. I mean, obviously, they're bulls, but just humor me a little bit, please. The Aqua breed has horns that usually point upward, but can rotate backward. Each horn has 2 round bulbous forms and a hole at the tip, its mane flowing downward shaped like a beard with 5 teardrop-shaped blue accents in it. Its tails are usually straight but can bend to form a propeller shape, which aid it in swimming. The aqua breed is recognized for its high body fat, which allows it to easily float in the water. It swims by unleashing high-pressure jets of water from its horns, as well as using its tails to propel itself. It can also use the same water jets to pierce right through any enemy it hits. The bumps and horns on the aqua breed will glow light blue when it attacks. All of that information is incredibly vital, as this is all just a reference to old bullfighting that would occur. Bulbapedia says it real nice and clear. The 2 variations of Paldean Tauros being fire and water types specifically could be a reference to 2 of the most famous and controversial bullfighting practices in Spain. The Toro Embolado, mainly from the Valencian community, where the bull horns are set on fire, and the Bua la Mar from the Valencian region of Denia, where the bulls run down the Marqués de Campos streets and end up swimming in the Mediterranean Sea. You can put the pieces together from there as to what happened to these bulls and how they felt about all of this. But this Tauros exists as the combat breed because it was literally bred for that. Not combating other people in a war, but rather because you can't put on a good show unless the bull really wants to kick your ass. Though I will say I personally don't like bullfighting and think that if you really want to go bullfighting and you want to hurt the bull for show, that you also deserve to face the consequences of death. At least make it fair. From the water fish to poison fish Pokemon, because yes, that is their category despite being Japanese giant salamanders, we have Paldean Wooper and Clodsire. Paldean Wooper once lived in the water during the ancient times until they were forced out of their territory. As a result, they gradually adapted to living on land, namely in marshes. Paldean Wooper employs 2 adaptations to allow it to survive on land. Its gills have hardened, and it coats its body in a poisonous film that keeps it from drying out. However, these adaptations resulted in Paldean Wooper having heavier bodies and being only able to move really slowly. To defend itself, it will then use its gills to unleash a powerful poisonous liquid. Who would dare push Wooper out of its comfy home? Well, probably the super aggressive Flamigo who are found in the area, amongst any other Pokemon that like being in the water and are territorial. Don't worry, Paldean ecology will happen eventually. I've got to get through Pokemon Snap Lentil Ecology from the Switch, and that's going to be a banger video. Now, Paldean Wooper travel and work together in groups of 3 or 4 and enlist the help of their evolutionary relative Clodsire to ferry them across the water. Despite the adaptational change, Paldean Wooper can still float or swim in the water. They now usually live in those muddy wetlands, and as mentioned in Pokemon Sleep, they have been observed sleeping with its whole body coated in mud. After all, again, whether you're awake or you sleep, you gotta keep your body moist, make sure you don't dry out, and hopefully blend in with the mud, as they usually did underwater, to avoid being spotted by predators. So this is no real surprise, and honestly, the inspirations have not changed much between the OG and these new forms, as we have the same inspirations, plus one more I'll talk about in a moment, from animals such as the Axolotl for Wooper, and the Japanese giant salamander for the Quagsire, and a little bit of Clodsire, of course. The latter of which is often said to have the same behaviors to the point of unwittingly bumping its head against objects and moving very slowly on land. On top of Clodsire's back are 6 light purple circular spots. If it is attacked, it will retaliate by sticking out large, thick, light purple spines from these spots. A dangerous and risky move, and they kind of look like ribs, don't they? Now, Clodsire lives in the depths of ponds and swamps, and in Pokemon Sleep, it can rarely be found sleeping in the mud, though it is theorized that this is because it just becomes very sleepy after carrying Paldean Wooper through the water. Now, this does specifically tie in another animal through this rib ability that it has, as through its poison typing and said ability, we get the Iberian ribbed newt, who can puncture its sharp ribs through its skin and coat them in poison as a defense mechanism. It even has the orange spots on its flank in the same places where Clodsire has its purple spots. It does this by also doing the same thing Clodsire does, as it flattens its body and arches its back. The newt then swings its ribs forward, that's a wild sentence, so that way they are perpendicular to their spine. The ribs stretch the skin to the point that they burst right through it, producing a row of barbs down each flank that inject the poison into any predator foolish enough to venture too close. Once the danger has passed, it just the ribs right back in, and thanks to its regenerative abilities, it can continually do this with no apparent ill effects. Thank you, BBC, for that information, because that is dope, disgusting, and terrifying, and I love it. So once again, our Pokemon is very heavily inspired by what we see in the real world, and you would never know if you did not look for it. Despite all of this, we're still not done yet, because the convergent species of the Pokemon world are too few in number for me to put them in their own video, and they have such short information, so I'm just going to include them here, and I feel like they're fairly fitting for what we have to talk about. Now, I will say that a couple of Pokemon that we would or could technically consider convergent species, but are not labeled as such through Pokemon, are not here because they're not labeled as such. Now, convergent species are, in the most basic of sense, creatures in the world that have adapted to have the same traits. This can be just basic physical characteristics or deeper adaptations overall, and the most interesting part about this is that convergent species are completely unrelated to each other, yet all because of these external factors, they adapted physically to be more similar to each other to the point where we question if they are related, and they're not. We begin with what most people call an abomination, Toedscool, and while I initially would agree, especially as the first time I saw one, it was zooming across the horizon at Mach speeds in my peripheral vision, I have learned to love them. Toedscool has two long, thin, white legs resembling tentacles or mycelium, which it is the mycelium Pokemon, and those tentacles allow it to run at about 30 miles per hour or 50 kilometers an hour. They live in humid forests where it clings to tree roots, and the flaps it has will sometimes fall off and are said to have a chewy and delicious taste. It does have the ability Mycelium Might, so that clears them as mushrooms if it wasn't clear already. But it's through understanding that they are mycelium that we understand how they feed. And this would be akin to what we see in the Wood Wide Web, or as they say directly, a web connection of mycelium to tree roots beneath the earth that we stand on, with some parts extending for miles at a time and other parts being miles wide. They create a sort of symbiosis with each other and trees as they support each other in life, though sometimes they do decide to harm each other, dependent upon how they feel about competition. With this Pokemon, it is particularly inspired by woodier mushrooms, while the red goopiness that Toedscool is known to get is inspired by gutacean droplets that we see on other mushrooms. But how did this adapt to have such a similar shape to the Tentacool or Cool that we know? Well, the only idea that I came up with is the understanding that these mushrooms do hang attached to the sides of trees, and the white part is the actual body, while the upper portion is their sexual organ. What I'm saying is that the mycelium simply hangs underneath Toedscool instead of being underground, and has overall lengthened, and whenever it needs to escape from predators, it can drop down, land, and run at its 30-mile-per-hour speeds to get away. This would also explain why it's so adept at hopping places when it evolves, because it drops from trees so often. And just to round out Toedscool, it eats by wrapping prey with its tentacles and sucking out their nutrients, which causes the prey pain. Hooray! Why can't the mushrooms in Pokemon actually just eat decaying matter? Because they don't really talk about that at all. They might talk about leaves, but they don't really talk about, the corpses of Pokemon, which, understandably, it's supposed to be for children, but I'm looking at the Pokemon Adventures manga. Give me the body. You've already had zombie Pokemon. Give me the mushroom that is eating another dead Pokemon. Just throw it at me. Toedscool form colonies deep within forests, and they're said to hate incoming strangers. Rather than running, it jumps forward on its springy tentacles, which sounds funny until they're jumping your way in an incredibly menacing fashion. This boy is tired of running away and has now expanded its array of mycelium to make sure that you can't get away. It is really difficult to say that Wiglett and Wugtrio are even considered ecologically similar Pokemon to Diglett and Dugtrio, because for some reason, it bothers me to compare an eel and a mole to each other, more so than a mushroom and a jellyfish, for a reason I can't explain. It's completely unfounded, so, whatever. Nevertheless, Wiglett is literally a garden eel, from the way it behaves to the way it waves around in the water, or on land in Wiglett's case at least. We don't know what either Pokemon look like underneath, and Wiglett will burrow into the sand with only its body out to feed. it has an exceptional sense of smell, which has a range of over 60 feet or 20 meters. It can be very timid and cautious, which sounds like it's just afraid of everything, but this adaptation has allowed it to survive the rapidly approaching strike of a Veluza before it even notices that they're there. So, you know, pretty great adaptation. It is stated that they are likely only similar to Diglett because of their burrowing behavior, which I can get behind. Meanwhile, with Dugtrio, it makes its habitat on coastlines and hides within its rock when spotted by humans. It is considered a particularly aggressive Pokemon species, wrapping its 3 bodies around prey and dragging them down to its lair. That sounds really, really terrifying, especially when we consider the fact that they are 3'11" or 1.2 meters tall. Well, the next set is the last convergent species set. We still won't be done because you likely noticed that I did not talk about a couple of Pokemon such as Ursaluna, Weirdeer, and the white-striped Basculin. And don't worry, we'll get there and explain why they're not technically regional variants. For now, we have Poltergeist and Sinistra, who are unrelated to Sinistea and Poltegeist, and if I mess up their names, please bear with me because they flip-flopped their names with each other and it confuses me all the time. Now, the biggest difference right off the bat is that Sinistea is the mold on the T, while Poltergeist is living matcha. This explains why you could swirl Sinistea to weaken it, but our Poltergeist line will twist itself like a tornado all it wants to rev itself up for battle. And according to an old tale, Poltergeist was born from the regrets of an old tea master who was so obsessed with perfecting the art of the tea ceremony that he drove away everyone around him. It is more active at night during the day, prowling around towns and their outskirts, and they will dwell in cool, dark places, usually in old houses, which are its favorite homes. They tend to scatter their matcha powder on people and food, and if someone touches or ingests it, they will notice their skin apparently glowing for a brief moment before they fall unconscious as their life force is sapped away by the powder for Poltergeist to use as energy. It is capable of draining energy in this way from many people at once, and another behavior exhibited by it is its strong tendency to repair broken objects and seal cracks by filling them with its matcha powder. This of course relates back to the idea, or rather the practice, of kintsugi, or kintsugi, the art of repairing cracked and broken pottery through the use of lacquer mixed with a metallic powder, which is usually gold, which I will admit is quite pretty. This duo is also just straight up the traditional equipment used in a Japanese tea ceremony, being very straightforward. And we might as well round out Sinistra, who also lives in cold, dark places, such as the back of a shelf or beneath a house's floorboards. It's, oh god, I just realized it's like It's, but for a floorboard. In the past, Sinistras would sneak into houses and pretend to be tea in order to trick people into drinking it, so that way they could steal their life force. However, because the Chawan Sinistra inhabits had fallen out of use with the modern age, this act became largely unsuccessful. In recent times, it now, instead of sneaking into houses, will roam around towns and suburbs in search of their prey. It is generally active after sunset and will attack anything that approaches it with a life force draining splash of tea. And of course, in order to prepare itself for battle, it will build up its energy by using the Chasen on its head to stir itself. Poor little Pokemon just had no success in being consumed as it desired. Also, I realize it doesn't act like Sinistea does, in the sense that if it likes you, it won't kill you. Because if Sinistea does like you, it will let you drink from it and it won't steal your life force. So no wonder nobody will actually drink from this Pokemon, because there's absolutely no reward for the risk being taken. Also, you could better describe these Pokemon as morphologically similar Pokemon rather than ecologically similar or regional variants, because they do have very different ecological roles altogether. I also find it funny that, like, the last two moves it naturally learns is Memento and Leaf Storm, almost as if the person who failed to make the matcha is leaving behind a memento of his failed work, becoming the Pokemon, and then exploding into an array of matcha dust, which it technically also does. So here we are with white-striped Basculin and Basculegion, Pokemon that are not regional variants and do exist in the modern age, and at least within the Timeless Woods. Now, all the Pokemon I'm about to talk about are not considered regional variants by Pokemon, or they haven't been changed to reflect them as regional variants just yet. These are more like forms that have been lost, evolutions that are lost, special parameters that no longer allow these Pokemon to necessarily exist, while also still being the same species, technically, because there's some understanding that every evolution is a new species, and I'm not going to get into that here. Now, white striped Basculin's jaw is smaller than the jaws of either red or blue, and both its lower and upper jaws have beak-like protrusions at the front. Unlike the other two forms, white striped Basculin are known to be gentle, with an ecology different enough from other Basculin to spawn recent theories of it being a separate species. The white striped Basculin are also known to share food with each other, unlike their two counterparts. They are known to travel upstream. The journey is often perilous for these species, and many of them don't survive. As a result, the souls of the deceased white striped Basculin are often left behind in the waters of Hisui. However, when an injured white striped Basculin survives, it can unite with these souls in order to achieve the unique evolution into Basculegion. While it is more of a bass and piranha kind of like mixed together, white striped Basculin really seems to take inspiration from salmon, who can be afflicted, especially as it evolves into Basculegion, with salmon rot. A case in which, during their time swimming upriver, these salmon will undergo a dramatic change that causes their flesh to literally rot off of their bodies by the time that they are done with their journey. Very similarly to how these souls around Basculegion will coalesce around its back end, and what's fun about these salmon is that they're also nicknamed the zombie salmon, which explains the ghost typing for Basculegion, and they are said to be possessed by these other souls that did not make it. These souls are colored red on male Basculegion, said to be caused by the soul's rage, and light blue on a female Basculegion, whose paleness resulted from the sadness within the souls. When it senses danger, they will turn hostile and attack along with its souls until the enemy is defeated. These souls within Basculegion are said to have a will of their own and provide Basculegion with the power needed to swim on without tiring. These souls enable it to navigate even the most turbulent rapids with ease, and the male ones are known for their powerful jumps, while female Basculegion can conjure and control terrifying illusions against its enemies. They are said to have no equal in the rivers of the Hisui region. And once again, I thank Bulbapedia, who puts this next part the best. The male and female colorations of Basculegion may be inspired by the nuptial coloration of some salmon species, such as the Sakai or the Koho, during mating season. While both male and female salmon change colors during this period, the males usually become redder and more vibrant, while the females are paler in comparison. Basculegion's lower jaw and pectoral fins may also be inspired by the Itaumakip, an enlarged boat with side plates built by the Ainu people for seafaring and trading purposes. In real life, the Ainu created an extensive maritime network surrounding the Sea of Okhotsk with this vessel. This could have also inspired Basculegion's role as a ride Pokemon on water in Hisui. And the amount of recoil damage required for white striped Basculin to take to evolve into Basculegion, 294, could be Goruase, otherwise known as phonetic matching for Nikushi, archaic Japanese for hatred. Basically, the three numbers put together would then also be heard as Nikushi, which is basically two different words, two different meanings, phonetics, baby. Wyrdeer is well beloved by the people in Hisui for its highly prized fur, which provides excellent insulation from the cold, and it is used to make clothing, though due to its high regard and the fact that it is a noble Pokemon, I have my doubts that they hunted it, and rather that they worked alongside it and was able to get fur from it without killing it. By using the orbs on its antlers, Wyrdeer can unleash psychic powers strong enough to distort space and also create invisible barriers for protection. It also uses the antlers to lead Stantler herds and search for safe paths to travel. Their sturdy legs allow it to gallop and dash across the land and jump over any obstacle in its way. They are implied to be extinct in the present day, Stantler said to be no longer capable of evolving into Wyrdeer, and they're not known to be found anywhere. Once again, this goes back to the idea that Stantler was not faced with extreme pressures from the environment, from the other Pokemon, from people, maybe, to the point where, with it lessening those pressures, it no longer had to evolve into Wyrdeer in order to survive. It no longer needed a leader to guide them, and as such, it lost a lot of those abilities, no longer bearing its full typing anymore or full evolution prowess. It is also said that they may be based on different deer species, mainly the Yizo Saika deer and the reindeer. The former is a subspecies of the Saika deer, native to Hokkaido, the region of Japan which Hisui is based on. Much like how Wyrdeer is treasured by Hisuian people because of this fur being used for clothing material, the Yizo Saika deer is considered very important. I believe it's also Sika deer, I just realized. I'm gonna keep that in. Either way, it's considered very important to the Ainu people as their hide is essential for clothing, or at least was. The full moon rises high into the sky, bearing down light upon the ancient peat in Hisui. The great bear Kamui then rises before us in the form of Ursaluna, and this is hardly a joke. This is almost exactly what Ursaluna is. The peat block that is used on Ursa Ring to make it evolve into Ursaluna is where we get some of this from. And to help you understand what a peat block is an accumulation of partially decayed vegetation or organic matter, primarily found in wetlands such as bogs, fens, and swamps. It forms under conditions of waterlogging, oxygen deficiency, and high acidity, which slow down the decomposition of plant material. Peatlands, the natural areas where it accumulates, plays a crucial role in carbon storage and biodiversity, and additionally, peat is considered a non-renewable resource as it takes centuries to form just a few inches of peat. And that is going to help tie into some stuff with Blood Moon Ursaluna. But it still doesn't stop there, because you need to give it to Ursa Ring under the night, or the light rather, of a full moon in order to actually make it evolve. The reason for this is that it's just a full tie-in from Teddiursa with the crescent moon to Ursa Ring, who is more of a eclipse or new moon technically, with Ursaluna then becoming the full moon and Blood Moon Ursaluna being Blood Moon. Ursaluna's evolution is believed to have been triggered by Ursa Ring being exposed to the swampy terrain of the Hisui region during a full moon. Ursaluna's physique allows it to travel through the swamps with ease, and it can manipulate peat to its advantage. It is known to be good at searching for items and even missing persons using their sense of smell. It is an earth-bending bear, which is still really dope to me, though it seems to be more of just the earth-bending of peat itself. Now, this bear is suspected to be related to the Usuri brown bear, a subspecies of the brown bear native to Hokkaido, on which Hisui is based, and its surrounding areas. It may also, in some capacity, relate to the god of the bears and mountains Kimun Kamui within Ainu culture. Again, I will always say this, I am not the professional on Ainu culture, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. Nevertheless, it seems as though through the peat, Ursaluna has become one with the earth in its evolution into Ursaluna, with no real downside. But then there's our Blood Moon Bear. Known as the Blood Moon Beast, it is stated that this Ursaluna is the only one known to exist, and is unique in that its altered appearance cannot be attributed to evolution or form change. The name of this unique Ursaluna comes from the distinct red moon mark on his forehead. It is very old, having used to live in the Hisui region a long time ago until it drifted across the seas and arrived in Kitakami, where it made residence in the land's timeless woods. It gained special powers due to adapting to the hard environment of the lands, and it is highly alert, rarely making itself seen, but it does tend to appear during foggy nights. It can see in the dark with one of its eyes, and the mud it controls is as hard as iron. We have a predator that has gone through incredible hardships and has adapted in order to overcome all possible obstacles, including mankind itself. And considering we have Hisuian Sliggoo in Kitakami, it makes sense that the high iron content has affected this Pokemon as well. It also seems to be based on Onikuma, bears that have transformed into yokai after living for an exceptionally long time. They are known to walk on two legs and continue to grow, reaching sizes much larger than even the largest natural bears. Once again, bringing us back to what happened with Goodra. Onikuma behavior is very similar to that of ordinary bears. They live deep in the mountains, far away from humans, they are nocturnal, they hunt and scavenge and are able to eat just about anything. They rarely venture out of their habitats, but like ordinary bears will occasionally emerge from the forests into villages to look for food. Due to their reclusive nature, encounters between Onikuma and humans are very rare, but when they do happen, they are often violent. It'll always fascinate me how this Pokemon has lived for so long, and we are brought to them by Perrin, who is likely a descendant of both Adaman and Irida, really tying in the idea that Ursaluna traveled far through time and space in order to get here. Not that it has time and space powers, it just literally lived for a very long time, longer than it should have, and traveled incredibly far to get to this point. But with that, we have finally finished explaining all the deep lore of our regional forms. Tell me which one was your favorite, or even if I missed something. Again, I learned from you just as much as you learned from me, and I love reading the comments even if I can't actually respond to them all. If you made it this far, please do make sure you do subscribe. I will say watch time and comments are the best way to freely boost a channel, and more specifically a video, as said by YouTube itself. which would be a fantastic help. We're really close to 20,000 subscribers, and I got to figure out what kind of special I want to do for that. Thank you guys so much for your support. And as I said earlier, it's been a long time since I completed a script this long, sitting at 75.5 pages at size 12 font. I really should get myself a teleprompter, which you can support the funding of through becoming a member on YouTube or Patreon. Speaking of, let's go shout out every single member of the channel. Starting with all our gods of hope, Crow, Final Fantasy 14, Heals for Life, Biggins, Vanny, Nid, Buzz, and Summer, then of all our champions, Andrew, Marcy, Iskos, and Joshua Biggins Wilson, then the Knights of the Court, Pander, Luke, Sassy, Crumble, Moth Romance, Double, Shiny Gems, Sarah Brisbois, Vanny, Lemon, Fix My Nitrogen, Crow, Final Fantasy 14, Poal, Annie Stone, Allen, Heals for Life, Blue, Dalek, Warren, Hemphill, then the Wanderers of the channel, Zakai, Inferno, Twitch, Lydia Marie, I Like BLT, Dennis Garcia, Lion Clan, Nathan Palmer, Sophie Favark, Thea Haichi, Kristen Cab, Cliff, Micah, Daniela 808, Roger McLean, Supporting Boy, Kamutag 123 Star, Sveni Samari, Max Supreme, Surfer, Singe Zanzibar, Exported Cheese, Shy, Floriana 16, Midna, Azalea, Pyromaster, J. Gill, Reckless, Simpson, Nate, Prime 90s, Nebula Games, Jenna M, None of Your Business, Wee, Ezra, Rowan Ferrady, Brock Baker, Zippin Pigeon 80, Abby Hicks, Adrian CS, Amanda Mastacola, 3 Ronan Matt, Space Lazi, Sadler Rankin, Abdallah Aladi, to Marco, Gaming Roots, Mr. Dagnall Gibbs, Night Owl 707, Evil Chan, Ruby, Softian Kai, Micah 626 Gaming, Nicole Manassian, Kristen Sandwich Wazza, Emmy, whatever this is, The Sporty Emperor, Michael Stein, Alolan Figment, Lost Wisteria, Medico, TH73, Spurgalicious, Sydney House, Miss Zora, Dakota Couch, Brad Sundimer, Drixel, Carl Jean, Hunter Al, Hussein Kassab, Rebecca Connell Hune, Jappy W, Memento Mortem, Marshy, Edward Kasowski, Fedeca Fox, Nerder, Screeberg, High, Gatti Cadabra, King Pie, Jack the Frost, Richard Ivy, Addy C, Jacob Square, DJ Monk 23, Squidwater, Rye, Smith Gamer, Bad Dragonite, Just J, M, MD, Horse with a Cocktail, Muse, Art World, Lumiel, Gwendolyn, Eastcander, 072, Andrew Frost, Pickonomics, Summit Slav, Knocknuyan, Ian Ray, Big and C, Night, Corner to Cobb, Michael Vale, Unseelie King, The Forting Skies, Daniel Tracy, Garrett Hoffman, Dylan Peters, Malachi Burkhardt, and Heather Weiss. And thank you all for being members of the channel. If you would like to support the channel, become a member for as little as $3 a month. Right now, I'm looking at getting a teleprompter and maybe upgrading the audio even just a little bit better. And it just helps the channel overall. So as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't you think I would do? Don't think I would do? Please be nice to each other. I love you. I'll see you next time. Bye!